Imagine hosting the most luxurious party of your life, while your family empire is secretly collapsing in the background. That is exactly what happens to Chloe Davenport. But the real twist comes after the phone call. She pulls her husband into a private library expecting comfort and instead discovers he already knew everything. No shock. No sympathy. Just calculation. In that moment, the story transforms from a financial scandal into something darker. A cold, strategic betrayal hidden beneath 10 years of marriage.
My name is Clara Davenport. In Chicago, that name isn't just known, it's a foundation. It opens doors to boardrooms on the Magnificent Mile and charity galas so exclusive, they're practically secret. It means being the only child of Richard Davenport. The shipping magnate who taught me our family name was the one asset that could never sink. Until it started to. My perfect life began to fracture during a museum gala we were hosting. Clara, the ice sculptures are divine. Sophie purred, kissing the air by my cheek as her eyes roamed the crowd. Just a little thing we threw together, I smiled. It was a complete and total lie. My smile was an expensive performance. Those ice sculptures, carved by an artist flown in from Stockholm, were the most affordable part of the night. Our penthouse ballroom offered a sweeping view of Lake Michigan, a testament to our family's legacy. Vintage champagne cascaded down a pyramid of glasses. Everyone who was anyone in Midwest finance was here. My husband, Leo, stood near the balcony, his laugh booming with the confidence of a man whose private equity firm, Vance Capital, had just had another record-breaking quarter. He caught my eye and flashed that devastating grin. My heart did the little jump it always did. Leo Vance, the wonderkind of private equity, with a smile that charmed hedge funds and senators alike, was the perfect match for the Davenport legacy. At least, I used to think so. I slipped away to his study to grab the notes for his speech. That's when I saw it. His laptop was open. A file on the desktop caught my eye, and I almost ignored it. But the title gave me pause. Final Draft DGL Hostile Takeover. A sudden, sharp coldness gripped me, the kind of instinct old money teaches you to trust. Excuse me, Sophie. I walked onto the private terrace, the city a blur of lights. I had to know what was inside. My hand shook as I clicked open the file. It was a draft of a press release from Leo's PR team. The headline was a body blow. Vance Capital finalizes acquisition of failing Davenport Global Logistics. The memo read like an autopsy report. A house of cards, over-leveraged for years, were about to call in their debts. The SEC was opening an investigation. My father was about to lose everything. Ruin. We never used that word. It was for other families, not for pillars of Chicago like my dad. It's a mistake, I whispered. The shipping routes are more profitable than ever. The last sentence of the memo seemed to answer me directly. All recent DGL profit statements are suspected to be fraudulent. The words on the screen blurred. Decades of risky ventures covered up by creative accounting. And it was all gone, everything. The string quartet began a lively Vivaldi piece. I looked up and saw Leo, laughing with a rival investor, looking completely relaxed. He hadn't even seen me leave. Then I read the final section. It detailed a firewall strategy, a last-minute deal that would transfer my father's most valuable assets to Leo's holding company, shielding them. A deal that would leave my father utterly bankrupt. It had been in motion for months. The memo called his strategy brilliant, escaping the sinking ship. My blood ran cold. The party was the same, but my entire world had just capsized. The champagne was still being poured. The string quartet still played beautifully. But the ground beneath my feet had dissolved. I walked back into the main room, my heels digging into the Persian rug. I went straight to Leo, yanking his arm. He leaned in, his breath a mix of expensive whiskey and victory. We have to talk, right now, in the studies. His charming smile faltered. Can it wait, darling? I'm closing a big one here. No. My voice was a shard of ice. It cannot. He excused himself smoothly, his public face a perfect mask, and followed me into the mahogany-paneled study, the thick door sealing us in. The music vanished, replaced by the quiet hum of the city far below. "What was so critical you had to drag me out of my own party?" Leo demanded, his charm gone. In the cool light from the skyline, his face seemed like a stranger's. "My father's company," I choked out, the words getting stuck. "It's over, it's all gone." I watched his face, expecting shock, some concern, a promise that we would handle this together. Instead, his entire body relaxed. The tension in his jaw melted. He looked relieved. "I know," he said. "Those 2 words hurt more than the entire document, you know?" The tip came from my own legal department. He walked over to his wet bar and poured a glass of scotch. On the rocks. He didn't make me one. I had to know when the news was going to drop. I had to finalize my own takeover before the implosion. I just stared at him, speechless. "Implosion?" "Leo, that is my father." "Your father," he said, taking a long sip, "was a high-stakes gambler who ran out of luck. A legend for a while, but he was cooking the books. The SEC has been building a case for a year. Tonight, the whole thing fell apart. He reported the end of my world like it was a quarterly earnings call. The room tilted. I leaned against a bookshelf filled with classics he'd never even opened. How can you be so calm? We have to get to my father. We need to call our lawyers. We don't have to do a thing, Clara. He put his glass down. You need to handle your family's disaster. I need to protect my firm. A deep crack split right through my heart. Your firm? My company, my capital, my reputation. He looked at me then, and his eyes were utterly empty. A complete stranger. Our prenuptial agreement is solid as a rock, and thank God for that. My team, my funds, my entire portfolio, it's all held in a corporate trust, shielded from your father's creditors and from you. Every word was a clean, precise incision. This isn't personal, Clara, it's business. The Davenport name is radioactive now, a liability I cannot take on. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm filing for divorce first thing in the morning. My attorney has had the paperwork ready for 6 weeks. All the air rushed out of me. I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You have to be kidding me. This is some kind of horrible joke. I've never been more serious. He pulled a thick document from his jacket. He brought divorce papers to our fundraising gala. This is the separation agreement. It's generous. Sign it tonight, and we can manage the narrative. You get a decent settlement. If you fight me, he let the threat hang in the air. You'll lose. Spectacularly. And you'll walk away with nothing but your family's debt. I glanced at the papers, my stomach twisting into a knot. Settlement? What about this penthouse? Our home? A cold, superior smile played on his lips. This apartment is titled to an LLC under Vance Capital. It always has been. You were just living here. It's my asset. Same goes for the lake house and the condo in Vale. All protected. All mine. A decade of a picture-perfect lie crumbled into dust around me. The homes I decorated, the life I thought we were creating, it was all just a stage. You knew, I whispered, the sickening reality finally crashing down. You planned this. My name is not on a single one of those properties, is it? That prenup was never about us. It was about protecting your fortune from my family. It's called risk mitigation, sweetheart, he said, the nickname sounding like an insult. You always have to insure yourself against the biggest liability. And your father was a ticking time bomb. The shock finally erupted into white-hot fury. You monster. Was our whole marriage just a business deal that went bad? His expression changed, not to remorse, but to annoyance. It was a beneficial partnership that ran its course. This is business, Clara. When a legacy brand collapses, you don't go down with it. You divest, and I am not sinking with the Davenport name. He pushed the papers and pen across the desk. Sign them. Pack a few things. Be gone by Friday. It's the cleanest way for everyone. Go to hell. His jaw clenched. Your choice. But if you make this a fight, I will bury you. I have the best lawyers in Chicago. You have a disgraced father and a name that's about to be a joke. Just sign it. Take the money. You can walk away with enough capital to start fresh. Start fresh. The idea was so humiliating I nearly laughed out loud. My own inheritance would be gone, frozen by the courts along with my father's accounts. This is your only play. My last act of generosity. Generosity. The word tasted like acid. Just then, the study door creaked open. A stylish, dark-haired woman peered in. Sophie, my best friend since college. Her face was a perfect painting of concern, but her eyes were cold and hard. Leo, is everything okay? The vibe out there is getting tense. In this town, financial ruin travels faster than gossip. Leo didn't miss a beat. Come on in, Sophie. Perfect timing. Clara was just accepting the terms of our divorce. She slunk into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. She refused to look at me. She walked directly to Leo's side, placing a hand on his forearm with a casual possessiveness. The last piece of the puzzle clicked horribly into place. You, I whispered, my gaze shifted between them. The two of you. Sophie had the audacity to look sympathetic. Clara, it's a strategic realignment. Leo and I just have a better synergy. Our world can't run on sentiment. How long? My voice was a thread. Leo answered for her. Long enough. Oh, it mattered. God, it mattered. Because every late-night phone call, every weekend trip to the lake house, every secret I had ever told her was now a lie. Every time she defended Leo's long work nights, every time she admired the home I built, it was all an act. Get out, I said, my voice trembling as I tried to hold on to any shred of dignity. Both of you, get out of my home. My home, Leo corrected, his voice low and dangerous. He slid the papers towards me. My lawyer arrives at 9 a.m. I'd advise you to be smart about this. He took Sophie's hand, and led her out of the room. Back to the wreckage of the party, my marriage, my entire life. I was alone in our Fifth Avenue apartment, the charity gala finally over. The last of the air kisses and fake goodbyes echoed in the hall. From the window, I watched the line of town cars melt into the New York night. His desk was unusually tidy, except for an old folder. Inside wasn't a contract, but a press release. For immediate release. Marcus Thorne announces divorce. It cited my family shipping business and the impending federal investigation. I sank into the Chesterfield sofa, the words blurring. He was offering a settlement of $5 million to walk away quietly and forfeit any other claim. The statement promised a swift, private separation, no messy media circus. It was all about protecting his political brand. My fingers trembled on the page. I saw my father's face, decades of building our family's legacy, now set for ruin. I pictured Marcus on television looking so concerned. I saw Isabella, his press secretary, smirking in the background. My hand pulled back. I would not sign this. Maybe it was just the family pride he always mocked. We don't bow to storms, Chloe, my dad used to say. We are the storm. The elevator chimed softly. It was Maria, our head housekeeper. The worry in her eyes was genuine. Mrs. Thorne, the caterers have cleared out. What are your plans for the morning staff? I looked at this woman who had been with my family for 20 years. I thought of our cook, our driver, good people, whose lives were tied to a political machine about to discard me. Give everyone the week, I said, my voice steady, with their full pay. And Maria, thank you for everything. She just nodded, her lip trembling. She knew. When she left, the silence was a physical thing. I was a prisoner in my own home, married to a man I didn't recognize. The daughter of a man the news would soon call a fraud. My phone was buzzing, but I only needed to make one call. I hit the number. He picked up instantly. Dad. The word was a choked sob. Chloe. My father's voice was heavy, worn down by a day of lawyers and accusations, but the steel was still there. The voice that taught me how to read nautical charts. You saw the... Marcus is divorcing me. He's taking it all. He knew, Dad. He knew this was coming, and he used it. I heard a deep, weary sigh. I am so sorry, girl. This is on me. My pride. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered. You fight, he said. I heard that old fire in his voice, the captain's command. You are a DeWitt. We don't sink with the ship. We find a lifeboat and we row. You hear me? He wants me to sign. Don't, my father snapped. Don't you sign a thing until you call Arthur Finch. He's the biggest shark in this city. Promise me. I promise. Good. Now listen. The political columns are going to crucify us. You need to go silent. No social media. Nothing. I'm calling Arthur right now. He'll find you. Dad, will you be all right? A foolish question. I've weathered bigger storms than this, he said, and I could almost hear him smile. Just promise me you won't give that man the satisfaction of seeing you break. That snake in a suit doesn't deserve your tears. A single hot tear escaped, and I swiped it away with fury. Okay, I love you, Chloe. No matter what the papers say tomorrow, you remember that. I love you too, Dad. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of our massive apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and I made a vow not to shed another tear. A plan started forming. Call Arthur Finch. Transfer my personal savings. Pack a bag. Find somewhere to disappear. The scope of it was paralyzing. A clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly, marking time in a life that no longer existed. My world was gone. My name was Chloe DeWitt Thorne, and overnight it had become a liability. But in that crushing darkness, something new began to grow. It wasn't hope. It was something colder, harder. It was the terrifying freedom of having nothing left to lose. Sleep never came. I roamed the apartment like a ghost, past photos of us laughing in the Hamptons, past art we'd bought together. It all felt like evidence of a beautifully constructed lie. When the gray New York dawn broke, I was already dressed. A cashmere sweater and jeans, my new uniform. I sat at the marble island, coffee cold beside me, my laptop open. The online world had already convicted my father. Shipping scandal sinks DeWitt empire, one blog crowed. My father's photo, once a symbol of New York commerce, was now splashed across every financial site. My phone was a cascade of alerts. A few messages of fake concern, but mostly a quiet exodus from my contact list. And Isabella, I saw with a knot of ice in my stomach, had posted a picture from a press briefing. The caption was simple, turning the page. I heard the click of Marcus's handmade Oxford shoes on the hardwood before he appeared, dressed for victory in a perfectly tailored suit. His tie was knotted flawlessly. He looked refreshed, invigorated, like a politician whose polls just surged. You're awake, he stated, moving to the coffee machine without looking at me. Funny, I couldn't sleep. The sound of my family's public execution kept me up. He ignored the barb, the machine hissings as he made his cappuccino. My attorney will have the final papers by 10. I trust you've considered my offer. I looked at the press release on the island. A $5 million donation to the Chloe Goes Away Fund. How charitable. He finally faced me. It's more than fair, Chloe. You would be a fool to refuse it. If you fight me, that $5 million will evaporate in lawyers' bills before you even see a courtroom. And you'll lose. The prenup is ironclad. Your family's name is radioactive now. Nobody will touch you. It's over. Chloe, sign it. Go to Paris for a year. The condescending advice felt like a slap. I'm not running away, Marcus. New York is my home. Not anymore, he said, his voice dropping. The co-op board is already preparing a motion. Having the daughter of a notorious fraudster in the building, it is bad for everyone's image. You understand. They'll push you out. Or I will. It's so much easier if you just go. I rose from the stool, my knees shaking but my back straight. I am not signing anything until I've spoken to Arthur Finch. For the first time, a flash of irritation crossed his perfect facade. Finch is drowning in your father's disaster. He won't have time for this. Besides, his name is as tarnished as yours now. He checked his expensive watch. I have a flight to D.C. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste, you know? Creates so much political capital. He was going to use my family's ruin to climb higher. Of course he was. You knew, I said, the words heavy with betrayal. You knew my father's company was being investigated for months. He took a slow sip of his coffee. I'm in politics, Chloe. It's my job to know things. I saw the cracks in the DeWitt Foundation over a year ago. I just prepared for the inevitable. Prepared by marrying me? Was I just another part of your 5-year plan? The answer was in his cold, dismissive silence. The space between us was a graveyard of broken promises. And Isabella? I pushed, my voice trembling with rage. Is she your next political alliance? For the first time, his mask of calm slipped, replaced by pure anger. Leave Isabella out of this. This is about damage control. It's politics. This was my life. The cry echoed in the huge, empty room. My father. Our marriage. Our baby. This isn't a press conference, Marcus. This is everything to me. And that chapter is over, he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. Sign the papers. Be at the lawyer's office by noon, or I'll have the doorman escort you out with nothing. Don't make a scene. He turned and walked away. The private elevator doors slid shut, and he was gone. The silence he left was suffocating. I couldn't just sit here, in this museum of a home, and wait for him to destroy me. I immediately called Arthur Finch, my father's lawyer. His voicemail was full. I tried his direct line. An assistant told me Mr. Finch was tied up in emergency meetings and unavailable for foreseeable future. A spike of pure panic shot through me. I was completely alone in this. No, not completely. I found an old duffel bag and threw in cash, my passport, my grandmother's ring, and a burner phone. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to get out. On the console table, our photo from the Monaco Grand Prix caught my eye. My smile was so naive, so full of dreams. His was possessive, the look of a venture capitalist who just closed a deal. I pulled the picture from its cold chrome frame, ripped it in half, and dumped his arrogant face in the bin. The Vance estate was a marvel of glass, and steel perched over the Sausalito cliffs. It was my father's signature creation. I learned to crawl on its marble floors. I had my sweet 16 its infinity pool. It was the only part of my life I thought was untouchable, held safely in a family trust. The black government sedan parked at the gate was the first clue I was terribly wrong. The first red flag was the federal marshal at the door. The second was the official notice taped to the glass entrance of our penthouse. A seizure warrant. This property is now under federal control. I just stood there on the cold lobby floor, the damp San Francisco air biting at my skin, staring at the seal. They were efficient. The government wasn't messing around. My family's legacy was now an active investigation. I searched in my clutch for my key fob. The heavy custom fob felt foreign in my hand. I held it to the elevator panel. Nothing. The light stayed red. They already cut off all access. "Ma'am, you can go in." A man in a simple navy suit stepped forward. He looked young, almost kind, but his eyes were firm. "This is my home," I said, my voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this residence is sealed by court order. Only authorized personnel from the Bureau are allowed entry." He gave a slight nod toward a dark car parked across the street. "The building is under constant surveillance." I stared at the car, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. "My father, Marcus Vance. Is he inside?" The agent's professional mask slipped, showing a flicker of sympathy. "No, ma'am. He hasn't been here since early this morning. A team escorted him to the federal building for an interview. We haven't seen him." My knees felt weak, ready to give out. They had him. My father, who taught me how to sail and collected first edition novels, was in some cold government room. "Do you know where he is? Now, has he been arrested for something?" "My apologies, I don't have that information." "You have to speak with his attorney." The same attorney who had been dodging my calls all morning. I just nodded, a tight, painful gesture. I walked back to the curb where the town car billed to Julian S. corporate account. A fact that now turned my stomach was waiting. I gave the driver the address for the Vance Group downtown. The tower, a shining monument to my father S. dreams, was under assault. News vans clogged the street, their satellite dishes aimed at the building like weapons. A swarm of reporters and photographers was pushed back by police barricades. A small group of protesters with angry signs chanted at the entrance. I put on a pair of dark sunglasses, looked down, and asked the driver to take me around to the service entrance in the alley. The security chief there, Miguel, knew me right away. He'd been with my father for 30 years. He used to sneak me macarons from the executive suite when I'd visit as a girl. Today, his face was a portrait of worry. "Miss Vance, this is no place for you right now." "Miguel, I need to get to my father's office. Please," he hesitated, looking nervously at the mayhem out front. "It's a total madhouse. The feds are everywhere, taking boxes of everything. They're ripping the place apart. It's just not right, what they're doing to your father. Please, Miguel." He sighed, a long, weary sound, and gave one sharp nod. He used his key to call the service elevator. "Go directly to the top floor, but you need to be quick. They have agents posted on every single level." The elevator doors opened onto the 50th floor. The usual frantic energy of the main office was gone. In its place was a quiet, organized invasion. Men and women in dark, practical suits FBI were rolling out dollies loaded with computers and file boxes. They were disconnecting servers, unplugging phones, and sealing entire wings with yellow evidence tape. The enormous bronze sculpture of the Golden Gate Bridge was gone, leaving a sad, empty spot on the floor. The few remaining staff were huddled in shocked, silent clusters, whispering. I felt like I was walking through a bad dream toward the corner office, my father's sanctuary. The heavy redwood door was ajar. 2 agents were inside. One was photographing everything, while the other was carefully packing the architectural models from my father's shelves. "You can't be in here," the one with the camera said, his tone more exhausted than aggressive. "I'm his daughter." The 2 agents exchanged a brief, unreadable look. The older one, a man with tired eyes and rounded shoulders, gave a small nod. "You get 1 minute, but you are not to touch anything." I stepped inside the room. It felt violated. The massive teak desk was completely clear. Its surface was covered in a fine layer of fingerprint dust. His ergonomic chair was twisted to the side, as if my father had been yanked out of it. I could almost feel the panic of his last moments in here, the world crashing down. My eyes scanned the rooms, searching for something, a clue, a message, anything. And then I saw it, tucked inside the scales model of the first library he ever built. It was a spot only I would know to look. A tiny encrypted USB drive. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I glanced at the 2 agents. They were now discussing how to tag an antique city blueprint as evidence. I walked casually to the display, pretending to admire the craftsmanship. In one fluid motion, my hand dipped inside, grabbed the drive, and slid it into my coat pocket. "Time's up, Miss Vance." The older agent's voice was flat. "I'm sorry for your trouble. For what it's worth, your father was always a huge supporter of the SF Symphony Gala every year. His attempt at being kind felt like a slap." I just nodded, unable to speak, and walked back out into the hall. I didn't bother waiting for the service elevator. I ran down the fire escape, the burn in my legs a welcome distraction from the chaos. I pushed through the door into the private parking garage, the cool, exhaust-scented air hitting my skin, and that's when I saw her. Leaning against a pillar right beside Julian's new electric supercar was Sophia. She was on her phone, laughing, a bright, airy sound that was a crime against the horror of the day. Then she noticed me, and her laughter died in her throat. She ended the call. "Elara, oh my God, what are you doing down here?" I could ask you the same thing. My voice was unnervingly calm. Here to inspect the damage? Maybe pick out some furniture for the new penthouse you'll be sharing with my husband? She actually had the audacity to look offended. It's just not like that. Then what is it like, Sophia? Enlighten me. Because, from my perspective, it looks an awful lot like you were sleeping with my husband while pretending to be my best friend. Did you two enjoy comparing notes about me when I wasn't around? Her face went cold. The concerned friend I thought I knew dissolved, replaced by someone brittle and mean. You always had to be the main character, didn't you, Alara? Your brilliant father, your brilliant husband, and your brilliant little baby on the way. It was nauseating. Did you ever stop to think that Julian might need a woman who actually understands his drive? Someone who wasn't just another trophy for his perfect life? The absolute venom in her voice took my breath away. This was never some simple affair. This was a bitter, deep-rooted jealousy she'd been nursing for years. So this was always your end game? A hostile takeover of my entire life? It was always heading here, she shrugged, inspecting her perfect gel manicure. Your entire life was built on a fairy tale. Your father's company, your marriage. It was just a story you told yourself. Julian and I, we're real. We know how the world actually operates. You see an opportunity to move up. I shot back. You were always so pathologically envious. Of my family, our connections, of him. You could never just be happy for me. Happy for you? She scoffed, a short, ugly sound. While you were playing house and picking out nursery colors, some of us were out here working, clawing for a seat at the table. You were just handed everything. Well, darling, the family empire is gone. Welcome to reality. Sophia S.'s laugh echoed in the empty concrete garage. She admired a new diamond necklace glittering at her throat. Oh, and Julian's big venture capital retreat in Bordeaux last month? I was with him. The wine tasting was just divine. She smirked, her breath smelling of expensive perfume and victory. He's leaving you, Alara. It's over. I just stood there, my ears ringing. Bordeaux. He brought me back a bottle of wine from that trip. I was going to be sick. I leaned against the cold concrete wall, gasping for air as the full force of his betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The secure envelope my father's attorney had given me earlier felt like a brick in my handbag. My hands shook as I finally tore it open in the back of the Uber. Inside, there was a single, ornate brass key. It looked like it belonged to a forgotten bank vault, not something from modern San Francisco. There was no note, just the key. Then I saw them two small letters finely engraved on its head, MV. It started with my father's name etched on a small brass key, and below it a number, 418. Meant nothing to me. A lockbox? A gym locker? Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I answered, my voice a whisper. Elena Vance, a man's voice asked, smooth as ice. Who is this? My name is Mr. Davies. I am calling on behalf of Marcus Thorne's. You missed your 10 a.m. appointment. Yes, I know. My client's generous offer expired at that time, Mrs. Thorne. His patience has run out. The papers stated you were to vacate the residence by noon. As you have chosen not to, we are moving forward. A chill crawled up my spine. What does that mean exactly? It means, as of 12 p.m. today, the codes to your penthouse have been changed. Your things are being inventoried for removal to a storage unit. Your key fob is deactivated. If you attempt to enter the property, you'll be trespassing, and we will involve the police. He actually did it. My own husband locked me out. You can do that! I live there! You were a guest, Mrs. Thorne, not a leaseholder. Mr. Thorne has withdrawn that privilege. It is well within his legal rights. You'll find the storage details in your email. You have 30 days to collect your belongings before they're sold. The divorce filing from this morning is also attached. I suggest you get a lawyer. Goodbye. The line went dead. I just stared at the phone, watching the city lights blur through my tears. I had no home, no cash. My husband was a monster. My best friend set me up. All I owned was the dress on my back, my purse, and this strange, heavy key. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked gently, his eyes in the rearview mirror filled with pity. I had nowhere. A hotel? My credit cards were tied to Marcus. He'd have cut them off instantly. My own account had maybe $5,000. In San Francisco, that wouldn't last a week. My eyes fell to the key again. 418. Leo, I asked our driver, does that number mean anything to you? A building, maybe? He'd worked for my family for 20 years. He thought for a moment. Not an address, but there is an old private vault in Pacific Heights, very exclusive. They call it the Legacy Trust. I think they use numbers instead of names. It's S on Broadway. Should we check it out? It was a sliver of hope, nothing more. A thread. Yes, Leo, take me to Broadway. The Legacy Trust was a solid granite building hidden between two glass palaces. No name, just a bronze plaque by a heavy wooden door, 418. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was the place. I found the intercom and pushed the button. A tiny camera whirred to life, focusing on me. Yes? A sharp voice crackled. My name is Elena Vance. I'm here for account 418. A moment of silence passed, then a loud buzz as the lock released. The air inside was cold and still, smelling of polished wood and old secrets. The lobby was bare, save for a huge mahogany desk and the severe-looking man sitting behind it. Miss Vance, he said, his voice quiet, we have been expecting you. A shiver traced its way down my spine. Expecting me? Who was? Your father. He left very precise instructions. The man held out a gloved hand. The key, please. I gave it to him. He studied it, gave a slight nod, and then rose from his chair. This way. He led me down a silent carpeted hall past a row of identical steel doors. 415, 416, he stopped at 418. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy clunk, and he pulled the massive door open. You have 1 hour, he said flatly. The vault is soundproof. There is no surveillance inside. When you leave, close the door behind you. It will lock on own. Please leave the key at the front desk. He then turned and walked away, his footsteps swallowed by the plush carpet. I stepped over the threshold. The room was a small, cold, silent box. In the center, a metal table. On it sat just 3 things, a thick manila folder with my name in my father's handwriting, a small velvet bag, and a sleek black satellite phone. My hands trembled so badly I could barely open the folder. It began, My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, things are worse than I ever feared, and I am so deeply sorry for my part in it. I failed you, and that is a mistake I will carry to my grave. First, know that I love you. Don't believe a word you read in the news. You were always my greatest pride. Second, you are in danger, not of being hurt, but of being erased. Marcus Thorne is a lie. Your entire marriage was a calculated operation from the very beginning. He was put in your life by the Sterling Group to get close to our family, to our work to find a weakness. He is a professional predator, and I, like an idiot, served you to him on a silver platter. This bankruptcy isn't entirely fake. The financial damage is real, but it's also a smokescreen, a controlled explosion to hide the truth. The full story is too dangerous to put on paper. That phone will ring one time. You have to answer it. The pouch holds what little I could save. It's not a lot, but it's clean money, and it's all yours. Use it to vanish. Be smart, and trust no one. Not our lawyers, not our friends, and certainly not anyone connected to Marcus. They are all watching. My biggest regret, my love, is that I never taught you to be ruthless. I wanted to protect you from the dirty side of my world. In doing so, I left you completely unprepared. Please forgive me. When the phone rings, you will know what to do. Be strong. Be the Vance I raised you to be. All my love. I read the letter again. Then a third time. The words didn't make sense. Marcus, a corporate spy. My marriage, a 3-year lie. A conspiracy. The vault seemed to tilt. The Sterling Group. I knew that name. Victor Sterling was my father's most vicious rival. He was at a gala just last week. I saw him talking to Marcus, laughing like old friends. I never gave it a second thought. My father always called him a snake in a $1,000 suit. I opened the velvet bag. On the silk lining lay my mother-esque gold locket, the one she always wore. Underneath was a thick brick of bearer bonds. I counted. $1 million. A tiny piece of what we once had, but it was untraceable, it was survival. And beneath the bonds, a passport from Italy. The name was Sophia Rossisi, but the picture was me, with short dark hair I'd never had in my life. Elena Vance was. In her place was this Sophia Rossi, with a different birthday. The passport looked perfect. My father didn't just suspect this could happen, he planned on it. A new life, a way out. My head was spinning. As I stared at this stranger with my face, the sat phone on the table let out a single, piercing shriek. I nearly screamed. My heart was a drum against my ribs. Answer it. My father's words echoed in my head. I snatched it up. Hello? Silence. Then a burst of static. Then a voice, warped and electronic. That key is for more than just the vault. I froze. Who is this? An associate of your father's. Listen to me. You are being followed. A PI named Graves. Marcus has him on retainer. He followed your car here from your father's office. He's across the street right now in a gray sedan. License plate 9 Echo X-ray Alpha 377. Do not use the front exit. Fear, cold and sharp, stabbed through me, followed. Of course. Marcus would track my every step. What do I do? In the back of the vault, fourth panel from the right, top left corner. Push it. It's a door to a service corridor. It will take you to the basement of the hotel next door. Go out their rear alley. A black car will be there. Get inside. The driver's name is Jonas. He'll take you to a safe location. I'm not getting into a strange car with a man I don't know, I whispered, my voice trembling. The alternative is walking out that front door and straight into Marcus's web. Graves's job is to record everyone you see, every stop you make. Marcus will hunt you until you have nothing. That $1 million won't help you if he knows you have it. Trust is a leap, Elena. Your father trusted me. That's all I can tell you. The line went dead. I stood in the dead silence of the vault, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. My mind was at war with itself. This was insane. Secret passages, scrambled voices, safe houses. This wasn't my life. This kind of thing doesn't happen to girls from Pacific Heights. But then again, most girls from Pacific Heights don't have their lives burned to the ground by a con-man husband and a ruined father. I looked down at my mother's locket, the bonds, the fake passport. My father, for all his mistakes, was never careless. He built this escape for me. He knew the danger was real. My decision was made. I secured the locket and bonds inside my coat. The passport and satellite phone went into my purse. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, just to feel his words near me. I found the panel. It was seamless, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I pressed the top right corner. A section of the wall hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow passage that smelled of dust and old wires. I glanced back at the vault, the last piece of the life I used to have. Then I stepped into the dark. The panel slid shut, plunging me into blackness. A moment later, a dim emergency light flickered on. I rushed down the hall, my heels echoing in the silence. It ended at a heavy fire door. I shoved it open and found myself in a massive, cluttered storage room smelling of chlorine and diesel. The deep rumble of laundry machines vibrated up through the floor. I made my way through rows of shelves, heading for a sliver of light from a loading bay. I peered out into the service alley, and there, idling at the curb, sat a black sedan. A large, grim-faced man in a dark suit was leaning against it, watching the door. When he saw me, he gave a single, almost invisible nod. That must be Leo. I took a sharp breath, clutched my bag, and ran for the car. The back of the sedan smelled like new leather and mint. Leo, the driver, was a man of few words. with a hard face and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't ask a single thing, just caught my eye in the rearview mirror and said, "Seatbelt, miss?" His voice was a low, steady rumble. We drove for what felt like forever. He took a winding route through San Francisco, crossing the Bay Bridge to the East Bay, cutting through back streets in the Mission, then looping back toward downtown. He was making absolutely sure we weren't being followed. The cold, professional way he drove was both terrifying and strangely reassuring. This wasn't some movie anymore. This was my life now. We finally pulled into a private garage beneath a bland, modern condo building in the Presidio, near the university. It felt safe and quiet, a world away from the glass tower where I used to live. Leo led me up to the 6th floor in a silent keycard elevator. He used a real key to open apartment 6B. The place was small, spotless, and had absolutely no personality. Beige walls, a stiff new sofa, a tiny kitchen. It looked like a corporate apartment furnished from a catalog. There were no pictures on the walls, no art, nothing personal at all. It was just a safe place, completely anonymous. "Fridge is stocked," Leo said, his voice flat. "Bedroom's through there, fresh sheets on the bed. This place is a ghost. It has no connection to you, your father, or anyone. It was paid for in cash. Here you are a nobody." He placed a new, simple cell phone on the counter. "This phone is clean. My number's the only one in it. For emergencies only. Don't call anyone from your old life. Not yet. How long am I supposed to stay here?" My voice sounded small in the sterile apartment. "Until this is finished. Or until you take that passport and disappear for good." He looked at me then, his eyes a weird mix of pity and determination. "Your father, he wanted you to have a choice, a real way out. Those bonds, the new identity, that's your escape plan. Canada, New Zealand, wherever. You could be Sarah Cole by tomorrow morning. Live a normal life, completely off the radar. And what if I don't want to disappear?" A small smile touched his lips. "Then you stay and fight. But you need to understand, the people you're up against don't play by the rules. They've already taken your money, your home, and your reputation. They'll take everything else if you let them. Sometimes the best revenge is simply to live a good life, even if it's somewhere else, quietly. I'm not the quietly type." I shot back, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "I didn't think you were," Leo grunted. "I'll be in touch. Do not leave this apartment. Don't order food delivery. There's a laptop on the table. It's secure. You can read the news, but do not log into any of your old personal accounts. They will be watching for that. They, your husband, his lawyers, Croft Holdings, maybe even the FBI. Take your pick." He walked to the door. "Get some rest. You look like hell." And just like that, he was gone. The lock clicked. I was alone. Utterly and completely alone for the first time since my entire world had collapsed. The silence was overwhelming. I fell onto the couch. The adrenaline that had kept me going for days vanished, leaving behind a deep, hollow ache. I was now a fugitive in my own city. I had a fortune in bearer bonds and a fake passport in my handbag. A gruff stranger was my only contact, and my husband wanted me ruined. The burner phone felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, along with my father's note, and read his final words again. The truth is more layered. What on earth was that supposed to mean? A controlled demolition. Was he telling me the bankruptcy wasn't what it seemed? Or was I just desperately hoping? I needed a lawyer. I needed a shark. Someone who could go up against Julian's army of corporate killers. But how would I even pay for that? Those bonds were my escape ticket. Using them for a legal war against a private equity billionaire seemed like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. I turned on the cheap laptop. It booted to an empty desktop. I opened a browser and went to the San Francisco Chronicle's website. Our story was the top business headline, but the world was already moving on. The details were disgusting. The sheer scale of the fraud, The powerful families that were completely wiped out. The SEC was calling it a classic Ponzi scheme. My father was being portrayed as a charming con man, a Madoff for the real estate world, and then there was one tiny line about me. Vance's daughter Alara is married to private equity titan Julian Croft. Croft's office had no comment. Of course they didn't. He was hiding behind his legal firewalls, letting my father and me take all the public heat. I made a cup of instant coffee and sat at the table, staring out at the fog blanketing the building next door. The shock was finally fading, replaced by a cold, hard rage. It felt sharper than my grief, and a lot more useful than my fear. Julian, Sophia, William Croft. They had all worked together to destroy my father and cast me aside like I was nothing. They had turned my entire life into a cold business deal, and I was just an asset to be sold off. I would not run. I couldn't. Running meant they won. It meant everything my father ever built, for all its faults, would be gone forever. It meant Julian and Sophia would get to live in my home, spend my family's money, and laugh about the naive girl they had so easily broken. No, I opened a new document. At the top, I wrote 2 words, the plan. Julian's courtship was a hostile takeover of Vance Enterprises by Croft Holdings. Sophia was part of it from the very beginning. My father realized it, and he built me an exit strategy. This bankruptcy isn't what it looks like. A controlled demolition. I stared at the words I had just typed. The list was pitifully short. It was all just theory and speculation, the desperate notes of a woman clinging to one cryptic message from her father. I had no evidence, nothing that would ever hold up in court. I needed proof, and I had to find out what really happened to my dad. I picked up the clean phone Leo had given me. I dialed the only number saved in it. He answered on the first ring. Yeah, it's Alara. I need 2 things. There was a short pause on the other end. Go on. First, I need you to find my father. Is my father in custody? Is he out? What's his legal situation? He made bail an hour ago. $15 million from the last of an offshore account. He's at the Fairmont Hotel under a fake name. The feds have his passport, and he's cooperating for now. A wave of relief washed over me so hard that it physically hurt. He was out. He was safe, at least for the moment. Can I see him? That's a terrible idea. That hotel is crawling with federal agents and other people. A meeting would put a target on both of you. Use the phone he gave you. The line is secure. Okay, I said, a new plan already forming. I need everything you can dig up on William Croft. His finances, his business associates, and especially his connection to my father, Robert Vance. I need to know if he was aware my father's company was failing, and if he profited from it. I need a paper trail. Leo was silent for a long moment. You're asking for something extremely complicated and extremely dangerous. Men like Croft, they bury their secrets under layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. It's expensive to find, and it's not what your father wanted for you. He wanted you safe and far away from all this. I'm already in this mess, Leo, I said, my voice cold as ice. They just haven't finished me off yet. So, are you going to help me or not? Another long silence. I could almost hear him weighing my father's wishes against my own resolve. I'll make some calls. It will take time, and it will cost you. A very large chunk of those bonds your father left you will be gone if we do this. Is this really how you want to spend your escape money? It's not an escape fund, I snapped, staring at the words on my laptop screen. It's my war chest. A dry laugh came over the phone. All right then. Stay put. I'll be in touch. And Alara, he added, try not to do anything stupid. For the next 48 hours, I was a ghost in that apartment, a prisoner in my own life. I lived on instant soup and old crackers. I had financial news channels running nonstop. I avoided social media as if it were poison. I tried to do my own digging on the secure laptop, but the corporate records were a maze of legal language built to hide the truth. The new phone Leo gave me stayed silent. My old phone was just a dead weight in my purse, a link to a world that was already gone. On the third day, the quiet finally shattered, not by Marcus, but by the harsh buzz of the burner phone from the security. I snatched it up. Hello? It was that same tinny, voice-modulated sound. Your father needs to speak with you. He can't risk calling your real number. Get to the Art Institute, the Michigan Avenue entrance. Go to the modern wing, by the big Chagall windows, at 2:05 p.m. sharp. He'll find you there. You've got a 30-second window. Don't show up early, and don't be late. Is he safe? He's getting by. But the situation is fluid. You have to be extremely careful. We're almost certain you still have a tail. The call ended. I checked the time. It was 11 a.m., 3 hours to get there. I showered and pulled on the same clothes I worn for what felt like a week. It was everything I had. I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was a pale, haunted mask, but my jaw was tight. I saw a new kind of steel in my eyes, something I didn't recognize. Good. I grabbed $500 cash from the emergency stash, a stupid risk, but I was out of options and slipped out. I walked 10 blocks in the wrong direction, then dove into a CVS to buy a cheap Cubs hat and a pair of dark, oversized sunglasses. I took the L train downtown, switching lines twice to be safe. I surfaced into Millennium Park, my pulse hammering. I blended in with the tourists, making my way to the museum. At exactly 2:04 p.m., I walked into the cool, marble silence of the Grand Hall. It felt like entering a church, all quiet and massive. Afternoon light poured through the giant windows. I walked towards the Impressionist wing, my shoes making no sound on the polished floors. The bench he mentioned was there, empty. I sat down on the cool wood, my back to the gallery, facing the vibrant chaos of an old Monet. My watch ticked over to 2:05. A man in a janitor's uniform sat down near me on the other side of a velvet rope. He didn't look at me once, the brim of his cap pulled way down low. He smelled of bleach and old polish, but I knew the line of his shoulders, the way he held his head. "Dad," I whispered, the name barely a puff of air. "Don't look at me." He breathed back, his voice raw with exhaustion. He made a show of wiping down the bench. "Just listen. We've got almost no time. Are you okay? Where are you staying?" "I'm okay, for now." The bail was a performance, a tactic to make them think I'm playing their game. "But Chloe, you have to listen. This is critical. Ethan is more dangerous than you can possibly imagine." He wasn't just my father's protege, he was a snake in the grass. He was feeding my father bad information, guiding him into the exact trades that would sink Vance Capital, just as he planned. He shorted our own company stock using hidden offshore accounts. He made a fortune from our family's downfall. Hearing him confirm, it felt like a punch to the gut, even though I already knew it deep down. "I'm not sizing those divorces," I whispered, my voice hard. I refused to let him have this. "Good girl, but you have to be clever. He's about to make his next move, and it's going to be big. He wants you isolated, made to look unstable, and removed from the equation. You're a loose end he needs to tie up. The cash and the passport I gave you are for your escape. Please, Chloe, take it. Go to Zurich. That key I gave you." "The key? For the safe deposit box? With the letter?" "No," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. "That key is a symbol. It's for the primary vault at Valmont Bank in Zurich. Your code is 419. The bonds and passport are just a decoy. The real money, everything I could salvage, is in there. It's more than enough for you to live on for the rest of your life." A world away from all this, a numbered Swiss bank account, a hidden family fortune. It felt like something out of a spy movie. "How much?" I asked, my head reeling. "Enough that you'll never have to hear the name Ethan Thorne again for as long as you live. But you need to go now. Tonight, Marcus can get you to O'Hare. You have the new passport. Go." "What about you?" I asked, my eyes burning with hot, angry tears. "You want me to just run and hide while you take the fall for all of this? Go to jail? I dug this hole, Chloe. I got arrogant and I cut corners. I honestly thought I was smarter than every last one of them. This is me paying the price. But you had nothing to do with any of it. Please, Chloe, for my sake, go to Zurich. I saw Ethan's smug face, Isabella's triumphant smirk in that parking garage, and a lifetime spent looking over my shoulder. No, Dad. I'm not running. He destroyed my life. He ripped our family to shreds, and I am going to claw back every single thing he took from us. My father was quiet for a long, heavy moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was absolute terror. Then you're going to need a weapon. My father? Conrad Vance. He's the key. He's old school. He keeps paper copies of every important deal. He doesn't trust the cloud. His penthouse on the Gold Coast has a study with a locked filing cabinet. If there's any hard proof of his deal with Ethan, it's in that cabinet. But that building is a fortress, and my grandfather is a truly ruthless man. He's nothing like Ethan. Ethan is a viper. He strikes from the shadows. My father is a shark. He will tear you apart if he even senses blood in the water. Then I'll just have to be smarter, I said, a wild, reckless plan already sparking in my mind. How can I get in? You can't. There's no way. It's impossible. I never should have said anything. His voice turned desperate. My time's up. They're watching. Just remember, Zurich is the answer. It's your emergency exit. It's your only safe move. I love you, kiddo. Be so careful. He stood up, shoving a dirty rag into his pocket. He shuffled away without a single look back. His shoulders were slumped, just some anonymous janitor swallowed by the priceless art. I just sat there for what felt like an hour, the faint scent of Windex hanging in the air. Zurich was safety. A comfortable prison, maybe, but it was safe. But staying here meant I was starting a war. A war I didn't have the first clue how to win. My cheap burner phone vibrated in my bag, making me flinch. I pulled it out. It was Marcus. "Yeah, we have a problem," Marcus said, his voice low and tight. "It's your husband. He's done waiting around for the lawyers. He's making a play. A very smart, very public play." "What are you talking about?" "Turn on your laptop," he told me. "Any major news site will do." I left the museum, found an empty bench in a quiet garden, and opened my computer, latching onto the public Wi-Fi. I clicked the first link for a live news broadcast. And there he was, Ethan, standing on the steps of the Chicago Board of Trade, looking impossibly handsome and somber in a dark gray suit. A forest of microphones was aimed at his face, and Isabella was standing just behind him, off to one side. Her face was a perfect portrait of wifely concern and support. She was wearing a simple but stunning silk sheath dress. I knew it immediately. It was my dress from my closet in our apartment. A white, hot, blinding fury ripped through me. A reporter shouted a question. "Any comment on allegations you knew about the Vance Capital insolvency, Mr. Thorne?" Ethan held up a hand, playing the part of a man weighed down by integrity. "I cannot comment on an active investigation. I can only say that I, like every other investor in Vance Capital, am the victim of a devastating fraud. My heart goes out to all the families who's lost their life savings and their jobs." He paused, letting the fake sympathy soak in. "My sole focus right now is on my family and on protecting the small amount of privacy we still have. My wife, Chloe, is understandably devastated by her grandfather's actions. She's taking some much-needed time away to process this unbelievable tragedy. I am asking the media to please respect her privacy." "My wife." He said the words like he was branding me. Another reporter yelled, "Is it true you've initiated divorce proceedings, Mr. Thorne?" Ethan's face collapsed into a well-rehearsed expression of pain. "That is a deeply private, personal matter. I will only say that the toll this has taken on my family has been immense. My only priority now is protecting my family and my team at Thorne Industries from any further fallout. Thank you." He turned, placing a firm, proprietary hand on the small of Isabella's back as they moved upstairs, the perfect picture of solidarity. The tragic, handsome couple, bravely facing a storm they had no part in making. The message couldn't have been more clear. He was the noble, suffering husband. I was the unstable, pregnant heiress of a criminal, a mess he was trying to clean up. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. My stomach twisted into a knot. I knew exactly who it was. I answered, holding the phone to my ear but saying nothing. I see you're not at the apartment. Ethan's voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around broken glass. Or at any of your usual coffee shops. Are you hiding, Chloe? It's not a very flattering look. What do you want, Ethan? I want you to stop being difficult. You saw the news conference. The narrative is set. You are the delicate, grieving wife, and I am the man holding it all together. We can do this the easy way, or we can make it an absolute train wreck for you. Your choice. You had no right to let her wear my dress. The words tasted like poison, a low chuckle on the other end. Oh, darling, it's just a dress. Isabella needed something appropriate for the cameras. Besides, it always looked so much better on her, don't you think? Let's talk about our settlement. My patience has run out. The offer is now $500,000. Take it or leave it. Go to hell, Ethan. I am trying to be reasonable here, Olivia, but if you want to make this impossible, he stopped, and I could hear the smug grin in his voice. Did you really think that cheap wig and sunglasses would fool my security? The Northgate Rehabilitation Center. Really? Visiting your dear old dad. A cold fear gripped me. He had me followed. Of course he did. His regular private eye, maybe someone new. I thought I was being so careful. Leave my father out of this, I whispered, my voice breaking. Oh, but he's at the very heart of it, my dear. He's the sickness that's ruining your life. And now, because of your little family reunion, the district attorney will be very curious about what secrets you two are sharing. Conspiracy is an ugly charge. He was threatening to frame me to make me an accomplice in my father's financial schemes. You're bluffing, am I? Don't test me. $500,000, Olivia. It's more than you deserve. Sign the agreement, and I'll make this entire nightmare with your father disappear. I have connections. I can ensure he gets a comfortable arrangement. But if you defy me, I will destroy you both. I'll make sure you burn through every last dollar of your daddy's hidden cash on lawyers before you're sharing a prison cell with him. He knew. He knew about the offshore accounts. How could he know? Unless he was just fishing, hoping I'd snap. I was silent, my heart pounding against my ribs as pure panic took over my mind. I'll take your silence as a sign you're finally seeing things clearly, he said, his tone turning cold and decisive. But this offer won't last forever. You have 48 hours to get out of New York. Go wherever you want. Just get away from me and my business. If you are still in this city after that, I will make your life a living hell. He paused, and his next words were laced with so much venom it felt like a physical blow. And tell your father to come pick up his trash. I'm done with it. He made this mess. He can be the one to clean it up. He can come get his broken, useless daughter. You're his mess now. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, staring out at the Hudson River. The afternoon sun glittered on the water. People were laughing on the boardwalk. The city just kept moving. His words echoed in my head. Tell your father to come get his trash. His broken, useless daughter. I meant nothing to him. Less than nothing. Just a piece of garbage he needed to throw away. A problem to be dealt with. The rage that had been simmering inside me evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't about saving my reputation. This was about pure survival. This was war. I took out the burner phone, the one from the safety deposit box at the bank. I didn't even hesitate. I dialed the only contact saved in it. A voice answered on the very first ring. It was robotic and quiet. I'm not going to Zurich, I said, my own voice firm and cold as stone. Tell my father the extraction plan is canceled. Tell him I need a very different kind of help now. I ended the call. I looked at the old iron key in my palm, the one that was supposed to promise a quiet escape. Then I shoved it back into my jacket pocket. It wasn't a key to my freedom. It was a key to a war, and I was just getting started. The focus from Ethan's call was like a shot of adrenaline. Fear was a luxury I could no longer afford. And self-pity was just a dead end. He had reduced me to a piece of garbage he wanted to discard. And in that one horrible, ugly moment, I discovered a strange kind of freedom. I had nothing more to lose except the fight itself. I didn't return to the hotel. If Ethan knew about the rehab center, the hotel wasn't safe. I walked downtown, my mind cycling through options like a gambler calculating the odds. My father's warning rang in my ears. They'll be watching your every move. His rival was a shark, but Ethan was a viper, and the viper was in my house. I needed a new command center, somewhere he would never dream of looking. A plan began to form, a wild and probably reckless one. I used cash to purchase a prepaid gift card at a pharmacy. In a small electronics store, I bought a cheap tablet and a small flash drive. At a second-hand shop, I found black jeans, a gray hoodie, and some worn-out running shoes, my new urban uniform. I changed clothes in the bathroom of a coffee shop, stuffing my designer outfit into the trash bin. I looked like any other city dweller, completely anonymous. Then I headed to the one place Ethan had legally forbidden me from ever visiting. Our first apartment. It was in a grim, brick high-rise in a forgotten part of Brooklyn. The concierge barely glanced up from his phone as he accepted the letter my lawyer had sent. He motioned me towards apartment 10B. The place was a small, stale box. Inside, piled up with a terrifying lack of sentiment, were the fragments of my old life. My clothes were shoved into black trash bags, my shoes in a jumbled mess, photo albums, my grandmother's silver, my financial analysis textbooks, my yoga mat. It was a memorial to the person I once was. Ethan hadn't just kicked me out. He'd tried to delete me. My entire existence crammed into a few hundred square feet of storage. I didn't have time for nostalgia. I began to search, not for memories, but for weapons. In a box marked Old Work, I found my former laptop. It was password protected and likely wiped, but it was something. I took it. In another box, I found a small fireproof safe where I kept our personal documents. The key was on my old keychain, which Ethan now possessed. I used a small crowbar from a toolkit, also tossed in a box, to force the lock open. My old passport no good. My birth certificate, my degree from Columbia, and at the very bottom, a small metal case. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a tinsel sleek flash drive, my drive. In our first year together, full of hope and a naive belief in partnership, I'd helped Ethan design his firm's data security. I was the tech prodigy, the one with the finance and tech background. I had insisted on backing up all vital files, contracts, patents, investment records onto a secure encrypted drive just in case. He had laughed and called me paranoid, but he agreed. "As long as you have the key, darling," he'd said, kissing my forehead. I built the encryption some myself. The password was the exact timestamp of the first algorithm I ever wrote for his fund. I was such a romantic fool. Later, as he grew more guarded about his business, I forgot all about it. And he had obviously forgotten that he'd ever given me the master key to his entire financial empire. My hands were shaking as I plugged the drive into the tablet. I typed in the password. The drive mounted. A list of files appeared. Clean, organized folders, finances, personal. Blackwood Capital, patents, trusts, internal comms, Vance. I forgot to breathe. I clicked on the Vance folder. Most of it was boring corporate material, meeting minutes and project proposals. But a single file, labeled Project Hydra Internal, stood out. Hydra, the multi-headed serpent from mythology. The perfect code name for a plan to ruin a competitor. I opened it. It was a scanned document, an internal memo. It wasn't legally a contract, but it was incredibly specific. It was dated 3 years ago between Blackwood Capital and a shell corporation. The subject, a strategic play regarding Vance Industries. The language was all corporate doublespeak, but the objective was crystal clear. The two firms would secretly work together to sabotage and bankrupt their mutual rival. It detailed a strategy for using algorithmic trading to manipulate the market, creating the conditions for a hostile takeover. The digital signatures belonged to Ethan Blackwood and my father's greatest business enemy. It wasn't proof of a crime, but it was proof of a conspiracy. It proved my husband was in business with my father's rival for years, long before he ever proposed to me, before he whispered all those lies about our future, our family. The encrypted drive felt hot in my hand. This was the blueprint for the attack, not the final confession. I needed more. I needed proof of the data manipulation he was currently using to destroy my family's legacy. I copied the financial data to the tablet and a hidden drive that looked like a pen. I wiped the access logs from the drive. I pocketed the hardware, the evidence. As I pushed the bookcase back to hide the safe, my burner phone vibrated. It was Marco, his voice tight with panic. "Olivia, the plan has changed. Your father, he's had it. He's going to Ethan's penthouse right now." "What? Why?" Ethan called him himself. He told him to come and get his trash. My father, he would never let an insult like that stand. A hot, sharp pride flared in my chest. Where is he going? The Olympus Tower. He's almost there. My blood ran cold. He can't. It's a setup. Ethan will have him arrested. Or worse, Olivia. He knows. He doesn't care. He told me to tell you. 10 minutes, be there and watch. Watch what? The beginning of the end, Marco said, and the line went dead. 10 minutes. The penthouse was a 45-minute nightmare in Midtown Manhattan traffic. There was no way. But my father did not make idle threats. If he said 10 minutes, he meant it. And he wanted me there as a witness. I slammed the hidden panel shut, bolted out of the apartment, and sprinted down the block. I flagged down a cab, shoving a wad of cash at the driver. East Side. The Olympus. Get me there in 15 minutes, and there's another $300 in it for you. The cabbie, a weathered old man with seen-it-all eyes, just grunted and floored it. We shot through Chicago's streets, the car's frantic energy a perfect match for the hurricane in my chest. I clutched the encrypted drive in my coat pocket. 7 minutes. The city lights smeared into streaks. What was he thinking? He was out on bail, his entire empire crumbling. A public scene with Julian would land him right back in a cell. Was this just a final, desperate act of self-destruction, or something else? The drive felt warm. The Chimera protocol. The taxi screeched to a stop before the gleaming high-rise. I tossed a handful of cash on the seat and bolted. I skipped the opulent, gold-trimmed main entrance and slipped into the service alley. I'd used this route dozens of times for early morning jogs, or to dodge the press during some crisis. The code was always the same, 1105. The day Julian launched Apex Dynamics. So damn predictable! I punched it in. The light blinked green and the heavy lock clicked open. He never even changed it, the arrogant fool. I took the noisy, scree-smelling service elevator to the penthouse floor. It opened onto a cold, concrete corridor. The private apartment entrance was right there. Another keypad. I tried the same code, a sharp, angry buzz, access denied. He changed the locks. I was shut out, just one door away from the explosion. But I knew this building's... I helped spec the security systems myself. I knew about the override panel on the maintenance balcony just above their floor. A forgotten feature from the original blueprints. I ran up the fire stairs one flight, found the utility closet, and jimmied the flimsy lock. The master key was gone, but a credit card worked just fine. I pulled the emergency release. A metal grate slid open, and a ladder dropped down. I climbed out into the howling wind, 60 stories above the city. The wind ripped at my jacket. The view was both stunning and terrifying. I crawled to the ledge over the street and looked down. Our penthouse terrace was directly below me, a ridiculous stage with imported furniture and a roaring fire pit. The living room's massive windows made it look like an aquarium, and I saw them all. Julian was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his face a tight mask of rage. His little assistant, Maya, sat on the edge of the sofa, nervously twisting the strap of her purse, my purse. And then I saw my father. He wasn't dressed like a man who'd lost it all. He wore a dark, perfectly tailored coat. He just stood there, completely still. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him. He looked calm, almost bored. Not like a broken man, but like a general inspecting a poorly run outpost. Julian hung up and immediately started shouting, his gestures sharp and furious, but the triple-paned soundproof glass turned his tantrum into a silent movie. My father didn't flinch. He just let Julian's storm wear itself out. Then, my father's lips moved. One short, quiet sentence. Julian's face contorted into something even uglier. He lunged, jabbing a finger into my father's chest. My father held his ground. He said something else, his expression never changing. This was their final confrontation, but not the one Julian had planned. My father wasn't there to plead for me. He wasn't asking for a peaceful resolution. He was delivering a verdict. I scrambled for my phone, fumbled with the camera, and zoomed in. The image was shaky, but their faces were perfectly clear. I hit record. Down on the street, something caught my attention. A car. No, not just a car. It was a custom blacked-out Escalade, long and menacing. It pulled to a silent stop in front of the building. A driver in a dark suit got out and stood by the door. Then another Escalade, identical to the first, slid in behind it. And another. A silent, imposing procession of pure power. 6 of them, forming a perfect threatening line in front of my home. Drivers emerged from each SUV, standing at attention like a private security detail. It was a power play so bold, so wildly out of place on a downtown Chicago street, it stole my breath. This wasn't some luxury car service. These were instruments, symbols of a fortune so vast, it didn't care about stock market dips or federal investigations. This was my father's response. This was his 7 minutes. Julian, in the middle of another screaming fit, must have seen my father's eyes drift toward the window. He turned, looking down. I watched his face shift. The anger dissolved into confusion, then into pure, slack-jawed disbelief. He walked to the window, staring at the fleet of urban tanks below. Maya joined him, her hand covering her mouth. My father hadn't arrived in a taxi or some hired car. He'd shown up with a motorcade fit for his head of state. The message couldn't have been clearer. You think I am broken? You think you hold all the cards? Look again. My father turned from the window and said one last thing to Julian. Julian spun around. His face was now pale with a sick dawning horror. The script had just been flipped. The predator had just realized he was the prey. My father then glanced at his watch, gave a small, dismissive nod, and walked with calm, measured steps toward the penthouse door. He wasn't escorted out. He left on his own terms. He didn't look defeated. He looked like a king dismissing a court jester. Damon stood frozen, watching my father's back, then glancing down at the waiting sedans. Sophia was grabbing his arm, her face a mask of panic. The elevator doors would open. My father would step inside. The garbage had been taken out with the kind of old-world power that doesn't make headlines. I stopped recording. My hands were steady. The fury was gone, replaced by a cold, clean sense of victory. It was all pure, brilliant theater. In under 10 minutes, my father had completely flipped the script. But the cars weren't the point. They were just a show, a magnificent distraction. While Damon was staring at the motorcade, reeling from that vicious power play, he wasn't thinking about the hidden data servers or the secret bank accounts. I glanced at my phone. I had the footage. I had the proof. I had the beginning of the end for him. But watching that first sedan disappear down the street, a colder truth settled in. My father's show wasn't just for Damon. It was a signal for me. He knew I'd be watching. He wanted me to see that he was not beaten, that our family's name still held a terrifying power, even if it was a different kind of power now. He was showing me how you really win a war. Not in a courtroom, not at first. You win it in the mind. He was showing me that perception is everything, and a good spectacle is the best shield you could ask for. The last Escalade vanished around the corner. The show was done. Down in the penthouse, Julian was still at the window. Maya was trying to get him to move. He shoved her away, his face a mess of humiliation and helpless rage. He turned and slammed his fist on a marble table. The rules had changed. The weak, pregnant wife he was trying to discard had a father who could summon an army. In 10 minutes, that supposedly ruined man showed more power than Julian had amassed in a lifetime of algorithms and venture capital. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The wind off the lake was freezing. I looked out at the city that had almost broken me. Julian thought he was calling my father to collect his broken daughter. But Dad didn't come for me. He came to send a message to prove that the first step to victory is to make your enemy completely doubt his own reality. I climbed back down the ladder, my mind already mapping out the next moves. The performance was done. Now, the real war would start. I had one piece of the puzzle. I needed it all. I had to get inside Marcus Vance's office. Back in the service hall, my burner phone vibrated. I answered. It was the same distorted voice. The display went as we'd discussed. Your father's position is secure. Your own, however, is now extremely volatile. Julian is trapped, and that will make him reckless and unpredictable. A cornered predator is the most dangerous. Your current safe house is no longer secure. A new one has been arranged. I don't need another safe house, I said, my voice low and steady. I need to get into Marcus Vance's personal office.
Tonight.
A long pause, filled with static, came from the other end. That's suicide. The security is state-of-the-art. Vance is there right now. The risks are mine, I told him. My father went after Julian's pride. I'm going after his money. So, are you going to help me or not? Another moment of silences. Then the voice returned, devoid of any emotion. There's a venture capital fundraiser at the Art Institute tonight. Vance is a primary sponsor. He has to be there. His wife is out of town. He'll likely go back to his office alone between 10:30 and 11 p.m. His personal security team is off on Wednesdays. You have a 30-minute window from 11:15 to 11:45 while the office is empty except for Vance, who will be in his private study on the top floor. The security system is a Titan Defense Series 9. The override code 1027. My blood went cold. 1027. Alexei's son's birthday. The same code he used for everything. A true narcissist's signature. How do you know that? Sterling is a creature of habit who worships your husband. The code was a pathetic tribute to their partnership. Alexei and Sterling, partners sharing a security code. The sickening intimacy of that detail was more shocking than any financial crime. The study door has a biometric scanner. The key will be on Sterling's person. The locked file cabinet is a German model. It needs a key and a 6-digit combination. And the combination? We do not have it. You will need to find it or bypass it. The voice turned grim. This mission has zero room for mistakes, Elena. If you are caught, your father cannot save you. Sterling will call the police, and he will press charges. You will go to jail. Alexei will use it to end the divorce and have you declared an unfit mother. This is the point of no return. I glanced down at my hands. They were rock steady. Give me the address. The voice gave an address in the financial district, one of the most secure buildings in the city. A car will be waiting on the next street over, engine running, from 11:30 p.m. It leaves at 11:46. Exactly. If you are not in it, you are alone. Understood. One more thing. For the first time, his voice faltered. Your father knows nothing about this call or this plan. He to stop you. This is your call to make, your fight. I know, I replied. Thanks. I hung up and stood in the building's humming service corridor. I had a few hours. I needed gear, a plan. I had to become someone else entirely. I wasn't Amelia, the betrayed wife. I wasn't Amelia, the ruined heiress. Tonight, I was a ghost, a thief. My 10 minutes were up. Time to move. The hours before the fundraiser dragged on. I used the last of my savings to book a motel room near the museum, paying in cash for a full week so I wouldn't seem suspicious. The room smelled of desperation and stale smoke, but it had a solid lock, and the window was private. It was perfect. I spent the afternoon preparing. At a hardware store, I bought a small flashlight, a cheap lock pick set that looked like a joke, a roll of duct tape, and a pair of thin rubber gloves. At a charity shop, I found my disguise, a simple dark cocktail dress and a plain black coat, boring enough to vanish in Pacific Heights. I added a small, simple clutch. I looked like 1,000 other tech wives in this city. I looked like nobody. As evening fell, I got dressed. I pulled my hair back into a severe knot at my nape. Very little makeup. My Mother S. pearl earrings were my only link to my old life. I put them on, their familiar weight a strange comfort. I slipped the encrypted thumb drive into a sealed bag and tucked it deep inside my coat. My only weapons were information and nerve. The lockpicks felt impossibly heavy in my purse. I took a rideshare to Pacific Heights, stepping out into the crisp night air. The fundraiser was a beacon of light a block away. I saw the valet line, the flashing cameras, the stream of expensive dresses and custom suits flowing up the museum's grand steps. I stayed in the shadows. I circled the block, sticking to quiet side streets until I found the address. Adrian S. Mansion was a modern marvel, a 5-story fortress of glass and steel on a huge corner lot, surrounded by a minimalist steel fence and perfect landscaping. It screamed new, untouchable power. Lights were on across the first 2 floors. The office, my source said, was on the 2nd floor of the room with 2 floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a Zen garden. I found a dark alcove across the street and settled in to wait. The cold started to sink in. Time slowed to a crawl. I watched Teslas and Porsches drop off guests at other mansions, the city's hum a distant soundtrack. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was completely insane. I was about to break into the home of one of the most ruthless venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. For what? A digital ledger that might not even exist. But this was about more than that. It was about taking back control. Marcus had taken my home, my trust, my future. My own father, in his own way, had taken my freedom. Tonight, I was taking something from them. I would steal their darkest secret. At 10:42 p.m., a sleek black Lucid pulled up. A driver got out and opened the rear door. Adrian Thorne emerged. He was sharp and lean, with silver hair and a face that looked carved from granite. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't look like a philanthropist. He looked like a predator who'd just acquired the museum itself. He moved up the stone steps, unlocked the front door with a tap of his phone, and disappeared inside. My countdown started. I waited, forcing my breathing to be slow and even. The caterers were gone. Adrian would be in his office. He'd pour a drink, check the markets. My window of opportunity was razor thin and shrinking fast. At 11:17 p.m., I crossed the street, my heels silent on the asphalt. The block was dead quiet. I slipped through the security gate unlocked, thank God, and climbed the 5 steps to the massive glass door. My mouth was dry as dust. I saw the biometric scanner next to the door, a Nexus Security Mark V. I typed in the code I was given, 0915. A soft green light pulsed. A quiet click echoed from the lock mechanism. I pulled the heavy chrome handle. It moved like silk. The door swung inward without a whisper. I was in. The foyer was immense. A polished concrete floor sat under a sculpture of twisting metal that served as a chandelier. A floating staircase rose into the shadows. The air smelled of clean air filters, expensive cologne, and power. It was dead silent. I eased the door shut. Less than 30 minutes. I moved fast, every sense on high alert. The house was a gallery of his conquests, modern art from rising stars, glass cases of tech awards framed patents. This was the den of a man who collected futures. I found the office at the end of a long, white hallway. The door was solid steel with an electronic handle, and just as promised, a formidable-looking Medico deadbolt. Locked. This was the first real test. I pulled the lockpick, set out, my hands shaking. I watched hours of tutorials in the motel. It looked so easy on screen. Insert the tension wrench, feel the pins with the rake. I fumbled, the metal slipping. A single bead of sweat trickled down my spine. I took a breath, forcing myself to be still. I tried again. I could feel the tiny metal pins inside the lock. Little gates keeping me out. I probed, I lifted, the first one clicked. Then a second. My entire universe was the feeling of cold steel in my gloved hands, the tiny vibrations it sent back. The third pin set. The fourth gave way with a final, satisfying snap. The bolt slid free. I turned the handle and slipped inside, shutting the door behind me. Adrian's office was a shrine of chrome and black leather, with bookshelves lining one wall. A massive glass desk stood in the middle. A ribbon of flame danced in a low, wide fireplace. The room smelled of leather and expensive electronics. On the desk sat a half-empty glass of Japanese whiskey and an open laptop. And there, built into the wall of custom cabinetry, was the safe. A flush-mounted keypad with a dark glass finish, totally invisible unless you knew it was there. It guarded his secrets. I needed the 4-digit passcode. My husband Marcus and his mentor Adrian shared everything. I prayed they shared this. Our wedding anniversary. September 15th. Was it possible? Was my husband that arrogant, that sentimental? I knelt, the pressure from my pregnancy a dull ache. I had to try it. If I was wrong, if a silent alarm went off, this was all over. But I had no other options. My finger hovered over the keypad, trembling. 1, 5. I pressed enter, a harsh, negative buzz. A single red light blinked once. Wrong. My mind scrambled. What else? Marcus's birthday. 1988. I typed it in. 1988. Red light. The year they founded their venture firm. 2016. Red light again. Adrian's wife had left him years ago. I had no idea what her birthday was. Panic was starting to close in on my throat. I was wasting precious time. I scanned the room, desperate for any kind of hint. People are creatures of habit. On his desk, next to the whiskey, was a single framed photograph. A younger Adrian Thorne, grinning proudly, holding the patent for his first major software, the Ariadne. He was a known workaholic. The shelves were filled with industry awards. The photo, his ego. I leaned in closer. On the metal frame, a small plaque was engraved, Stanford GSB 2008. The year he and Marcus graduated. It was a long shot. I entered 200. Red light. Damn it. My time was almost up. My eyes darted across the bookshelves, business texts, market analyses, signed first editions. And then I saw it. Tucked behind a row of biographies was a thin, worn-out book, The Art of War, a cheap paperback. A folded coffee receipt was sticking out as a bookmark from a cafe near their old office. A date was circled on it. June 4th, 2007, the day their first big seed funding came through. 4 digits. 10, 18. My hand shook so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. October 18th. Our anniversary. A quiet chime echoed from the wall panel. A green light glowed. A section of the mahogany bookcase slid back, revealing a safe. The digital lock was open. A shuddering breath of relief escaped me. I swung the heavy door open. Inside, everything was perfectly organized. Stacks of hard drives and protective sleeves. My heart hammered as I read the labels. Project Chimera, Geneva Labs, and finally, a single leather-bound ledger with one word in gold, Prometheus. My gloved hands trembled as I took it off the shelf. I placed it on his desk, my phone's flashlight cutting through the dark. This wasn't a business file. It was a personal ledger, filled with a sharp, angry handwriting that was not my husband's. The entries spanned 3 years. Dates, actions, payments, initials. My throat closed up as I read. April 10th. JS confirms clinical trial flaw. DV. Initiates market short. July 22nd. JS leaks phase 2 results. Takeover prep starts. JS Julian Sturseling. My husband. It was page after page of his betrayal. My father's biotech firm was being hollowed out from within. Julian wasn't just a rival. He was a traitor. He'd been feeding Damon every patent, every research vulnerability. He even helped Damon poach the lead scientist from my father's gene editing lab. All those unexplained project setbacks, my dad agonized over it, was all here, written down in cold detail. The numbers in the payment column made me sick. Millions. Next to a wire for $10 million, a handwritten note. Julian's first payment. This monster was building our life by tearing my family apart. I grabbed my phone, fingers flying, taking pictures of every single page. I began copying the files. The blinking progress bar felt like a time bomb in the silent penthouse. This was it, the hard evidence that would ruin them both for good. I was on the final folder when I heard it, the soft hum of the private elevator arriving. My blood ran cold. I froze, the screen lighting up the damning file names. A door slid open, confident footsteps on the hardwood outside. Julian! He was home. I yanked the flash drive out, slammed the server panel, and hit the button. The bookshelf slid shut just as the study door lock beeped. There was no place to hide, no closet to duck into. The office was all glass, with a stunning view of San Francisco and absolutely no cover. The only other exit led to a brightly lit, exposed terrace. I did the only thing possible. I slid under the huge executive desk, curling into the chair opening, trying to protect my pregnant stomach. The space smelled of rich leather and Julian's cologne. The study door slid open. Hallway lights flooded in, casting a beam of light under the desk. His expensive Italian shoes stepped inside. I heard a champagne cork pop, then the fizz of it filling a glass. He was coming straight for me. His shoes stopped right in front of my hiding spot. I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought the floor must be shaking. I could see the perfect crease in his suit trousers, his shadow falling directly over me. He sat down. The leather chair groaned under his weight. The desk shifted slightly. I was just inches from his legs. Any sudden move and his foot would hit me. He took a slow sip of champagne. I heard him lift the receiver of his desk phone and dial. "It's done," he said, his voice smooth with triumph. "Your father's little media stunt was a complete failure." A pause. He was listening. To Sophia, it had to be. "No, it changes nothing," Julian continued. "The old man certainly has a lot of fight in him, but fight doesn't stop a hostile takeover. He's finished. As for the girl, Clara's disappeared. My tracker lost her after she left her family's estate, but she'll surface. They always come back for the money." Another pause. I could just make out the tinny sound of Sophie's voice. "Your divorce is the last thing I'm worried about," Julian snapped. "Just get it done. Get her signature. If she puts up a fight, we'll destroy her with him. We'll plant the doctored emails. Make it look like she was part of the scheme. The DA's office owes me. She won't stand a chance." My stomach clenched into a frozen knot. They were planning to frame me, to put me in jail, pregnant with his baby. The original data is all on this server, Julian said, his voice sinking to a conspiratorial whisper. The one and only copy. My insurance. As soon as her father's company is worthless and Clara is dealt with, we'll erase it. We'll celebrate. Until then, it's perfectly safe. He let out a low, awful laugh, and completely under my control. Now, do what you have to do. I need those patents for the chemical compounds filed by Friday. He ended the call. He drank again. I heard the soft tap of a stylus on a tablet. Then, total silence. He was just sitting there, planning. A drop of sweat ran down my temple. The cramp in my leg was agony. I couldn't risk moving. I didn't even breathe. The flash drive in my pocket felt like a live grenade, a death sentence if he found it. After what felt like forever, he sighed, a deep, satisfied sound. He pushed his chair back. He stood. He walked from the desk to the bar against the far wall. I heard him pouring another drink. This was it, my only chance. While his back was turned, I had to go. Slowly, I began to uncurl myself from under the desk. Every rustle of my clothes sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I rose to my hands and knees. I peeked out and saw Julian at the bar, his back to me, looking out at the city lights. I moved into a low crouch. The door was only 20 feet away, but it felt like a marathon. I took one slow, deliberate step. A floorboard under the expensive rug gave a loud, sharp creak. Julian went completely still. I could see his reflection in the window, his head cocked to one side, listening. I froze, paralyzed by sheer terror. He didn't turn around. "I know you're here," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "The alarm system is silent. It just pings my phone when someone enters the office after it's been armed." My blood turned to ice. It was a trap. The whole thing. The empty penthouse. The unlocked office, it was all a setup, and I fell for it. Slowly, he started to turn around. He held his drink in one hand. In the other was a slim silver pistol aimed directly at my heart. It looked completely natural in his grip. I was thinking a PI, maybe one of your father's pathetic lawyers. His cold eyes swept over me, from my dark coat to my tan expression. Then his gaze dropped to my stomach, to the obvious swell of my pregnancy. A slow, cruel smile twisted his lips. "But you, the loving, pregnant wife. I'm impressed. Incredibly foolish, but impressive." My mind went blank with terror. I couldn't speak. "Is that the drive?" he asked, stepping closer. "Empty your pockets. Put everything on the desk. Now." I put my small kit on the desk. A burner phone, the copied drives, some bypass tools. He gestured with the gun. "Your real phone." I placed my phone beside the burner. "And the coat. Take it off. Throw it here." I slipped out of my coat, the cool air hitting my skin. I tossed it toward him. It landed by his shoes. He never looked down. His eyes stayed locked on mine. "You wanted the server files, didn't you? Sophia warned me you were getting desperate. I told her you were just a spoiled brat. I guess I underestimated that legendary family drive." He stepped closer. The gun was just a few feet away. "Unlock your phone. What's the password?" My heart stopped. If he saw those records, "Clara, you can give me the password, or I can make one phone call and ruin your father's reputation forever. You'll be divorced and broke by morning. Now, which is it?" My hand trembled as I typed in the 4-number VUMSORS. The laptop screen flared to life. The last window open was a file explorer. A thumbnail showed a hotel reservation confirmation, a penthouse suite, clearly booked for 2, under Isabel's name. Julian S. eyes went thin. "Give it to me." I picked up the laptop, my knees shaking so hard I could barely I took 2 steps and held it out. As he reached for it, his eyes fixed on the screen. And that was my opening. It wasn't a plan. It was instinct. It was just pure, raw survival. I didn't hand him the laptop. I swung it with every ounce of strength I had. Not at his face, but at the expensive Scotch glass in his other hand. The corner of the laptop hit the crystal perfectly. It exploded. Whiskey and glass sprayed across his chest. Julian screamed in shock and pain, stumbling back as his hand recoiled. I dropped the laptop and lunged. Not for the door, but for the one weapon I could reach, a heavy crystal sculpture on his desk. I grabbed it, turned, and swung. It hit the side of his head with a horrible, wet crack. Julian's eyes rolled back. He just crumpled. The heavy sculpture thumped onto the thick rug. He collapsed a moment later, his body hitting the floor with a dull, heavy thud. I stood over him, still clutching the award, my breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps. He was completely unconscious. A dark trickle of blood was already seeping from her hairlines, staining the cream-colored carpet. I'd actually done it. I knocked out Julian Vance. The thought was too immense to process. I had to leave. I grabbed my purse, the small hard drive, and my car keys. I left the laptop. It was ruined anyway. The data was the only thing that mattered. I took the hard drive from the desk. It felt solid and real in my hand. I shoved it deep into my coat pocket. And then I remembered the safe, the original documents, the entire reason I risked all of this. I ran to the wall behind his desk, my fingers fumbling with the hidden keypad. 1776. The panel slid open. I took the entire folder of offshore bank statements, jamming it into my oversized purse. I slammed the panel shut. I gave one last look at Julian, a broken heap on his own expensive floor. He was starting to groan, a hand twitching at his side. He'd be awake soon. I ran. I flew down the polished marble staircase, through the cold, silent foyer, and shoved the front doors open, not even stopping to close them. I hit the driveway and just ran, my heels clicking on the stone pavers. I rounded the corner onto Biscayne Boulevard, and there it was, a dark SUV idling by the curb, its lights off in the humid night air. The back door opened as I sprinted towards it. I scrambled inside. "Go, Alex, go now!" The car was already moving, pulling into traffic before my door was even shut. I slammed it and collapsed against the leather seat, my entire body starting to tremble with violent, uncontrollable shivers. Alex was driving. He didn't look back at me. "You have blood on your hands." I looked down. My knuckles were scraped from the shattered glass and smeared with Julian's blood. "It's not mine. Did you get it?" I patted the hard drive in my pocket. "I got everything." "And the house?" "Julian was there. I had to use a sculpture. He's unconscious." For the first time, Alex's brotherly demeanor shattered. His eyes went wide in the rearview mirror. "You hit Julian Vance?" He wasn't just shocked, he was terrified for me. Wow, Dad is going to lose his mind when he hears about this. "Where are we going?" I asked, the adrenaline crash hitting me like a wave of nausea. "Somewhere safe, somewhere he will never think to look, and somewhere we can figure out exactly what you just risked your life, and the baby's life, for." He glanced at me again, his eyes lingering on my stomach. "Then you can tell me what we do next." I leaned my head back, watching the Miami cities blur into long, glittering streaks. I really did it. I got the proof. I fought back. But as the shock wore off, the reality of my actions started to sink in. I assaulted my husband in his own home. I stole private financial documents. He was going to wake up. He would know it was me. That man basically owns the Miami-Dade Police Department. He has the district attorney on his personal payroll. This divorce wasn't just going to be messy anymore. It had just become dangerous. And I was the one who just made it physical. The 10-minute raid was over. The mission was a success. Now for the consequences. Our somewhere safe was a penthouse suite at a boutique hotel downtown, a far cry from some roadside motel. We took a private elevator straight to the top floor. The inside was minimalist and modern, all cool marble, sleek furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. A heavy oak door led into a large living area with a single sofa, a glass coffee table, and a built-in wet bar, the kind of anonymous luxury space where secrets are kept. "Wait here," Alex said. "Don't touch anything. I'm going to get the first aid kit from the car." I sank onto the sofa, the exhaustion of the night finally crushing me. I placed the small black hard drive on the glass table. The sleek device seemed to pulse under the dim lights. I took the heavy crystal sculpture from my purse, its sharp edges still slick, and set it next to the drive, the 2 trophies from my terrifying new life. Alex came back with a small medical kit. Without speaking, he knelt and took my hand, gently cleaning the cuts with an antiseptic wipe. The sting was sharp, a shocking return to the present moment. "He's awake by now," I whispered, my voice hollow in the silence night. "He's called the police. He's told them everything." "Probably," Alex said, his focus on my hand. "But he's not going to get the response he wants. Not immediately." "Why not?" "He's Julian Vance." "Because the silent alarm I had you trigger wasn't linked to his private security company. It was routed to a different firm, one Dad has had on his payroll for 20 years. Any emergency call from that address is automatically flagged, delayed, and rerouted. The first officers to arrive will be told it was a simple surge, a false alarm. They'll write a basic report and leave. Julian will be absolutely livid, but he'll have 0 proof you were even there. Not tonight. He'll just have a splitting headache and a story that sounds completely unhinged without any evidence. His pregnant wife breaks into his mansion and assaults him with a piece of art. It's going to sound like he was drunk and imagined the entire thing. I could only stare at him. The incredible level of foresight, of planning for every outcome, was astounding. Our father arranged all of this. Your father thinks of everything. And he always has a contingency. Alex finished bandaging my hand. "Now, let's see what you bought with all that courage." I plugged the hard drive into his laptop and opened the main folder, the file spreading across the screen. Alex pulled a chair closer, his eyes scanning the contents. He was quiet for a very long time, his mouse clicking through photos, bank statements, and chat logs with Isabel. His face grew darker and darker with every file he opened. "This is it," he finally breathed, his voice a tight whisper. "This is a mountain of irrefutable proof. Hidden assets, conspiracy to commit fraud. He wasn't just having an affair, Clara. He was building a whole new life with her, using money he was stealing from you." He pointed to an account in the Cayman Islands. "That's the smoking gun. It establishes premeditated financial abuse. This isn't just about cheating, it's criminal." "Will it be enough?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It's all digital. They'll just claim it's all fabricated. It was on a drive in his private safe, and we have chat logs that place him and Isabel together on the exact dates these transfers were made. The photos from your drive show the entire timeline. This," he said, tapping the screen, "fills in every single lie. It's a perfect roadmap for our divorce attorney. But more importantly, it's leverage, the kind of career-ending scandal that can destroy a man like Julian Vance. So what's our next move?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loud in the quiet suite. The simple answer was to call our lawyer. But my husband, as he loved to remind me, owned half the lawyers in this city. Could we trust anyone? "We do nothing with it." A new voice spoke from the doorway. "Not a thing." I spun around, and there he was. My father. He looked a decade older than he had this morning, the lines around his eyes etched with worry, but he stood tall. He was wearing a simple cashmere sweater and jeans, not one of his custom suits. He looked like a general after a long, hard battle. He looked at me first, his eyes scanning me for injuries, a wave of relief so intense it almost brought me to tears. Then his gaze fell to the laptop screen and to the blood-stained crystal sculpture beside it. His face turned to stone. "You went to the house. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation." His voice was dangerously low, vibrating with a controlled fury I had never heard in my entire life. "You told me not to," I said, meeting his stare, my own defiance surging to meet his anger. "You told me to fly to the Caymans and hide. You threw a charity gala as a distraction, but you never gave me a way to fight back, so I had to go and find one myself. I gave you away to be safe. He shot back, his voice rising as he stepped into the room. A clean, quiet escape, 1,000 miles from him. Not a way to get yourself killed, breaking into the mansion of a man who would throw you down the stairs and call it a tragic accident. What were you thinking, Chloe? This isn't a game. That server. I pointed a shaking hand at the laptop. If they'd found me with it, my God, I did what I had to. I shot back, getting to my feet. Nathan has a file on me. He was setting me up. Dad, he and his lawyers were going to plant files, make it seem like I was part of a fraud, then lock me away. What choice did I have? Move to some remote island and watch my own indictment on the news? The horrible truth hung in the air between us. My father shut his eyes, his face a mask of agony. When he opened them, the anger was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sorrow. I failed you, completely. You made this monster, and you left me alone with him. I didn't leave you alone, he said, his voice cracking. I left you a key. I left you Daniel. You came to my house. You laid it all out. I searched for the right words. You taught me the value of a big play, the power of one single shocking move. Well, this is my move. I smacked my hand on the printed file. I am not running. I am not hiding. Not anymore. My father looked at me with something like new respect in his eyes. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a fact he could no longer change. Fine. He walked to the desk, pulled out a chair, and stared down at the evidence. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We use every bit of this truth. The whole story. He glanced at David. Is this place clean? Swept an hour ago. Jammers are active. We re-ghosts right now. My father sighed. The bankruptcy. The fraud allegations, it's all true, Chloe. The debt is real. I knowingly bought toxic assets. I cooked the books on our occupancy rates to secure more financing, just to pay back the last round of vultures. It's S's oldest sin on Wall Street. I got cocky. I thought I could build my way out of any hole. My stomach twisted into a knot. So that was the truth. Simple and ugly, but his voice grew harder as he continued. This wasn't just a bad investment. I was targeted. This was a methodical, coordinated attack on my entire empire. Damien, with Lucas as his snake on the inside, was running a full-blown sabotage operation. They launched short-selling attacks on our stock. They filed frivolous lawsuits to stall our construction permits. They bribed city officials to block our zoning approvals. They leaked fake stories to the financial press. They poached my best architects and my lead foreman. They sabotaged a crane at our flagship hotel site. They squeezed me into a corner where I had no other move but to bend the rules. He pointed to the burner phone on the table. This holds the entire record of their conspiracy. They didn't just capitalize on my collapse. They engineered it. They are the reason for every single charge the SEC is leveling against me. I'm guilty of being a desperate fool. They are guilty of conspiracy, of racketeering, of pure corporate warfare. My world tilted sideways all over again. This wasn't just a mogul who overreached. This was a king being torn from his throne, brick by brick. So why didn't you go to the police, the SEC, the feds, and tell them what? My father laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. That my rivals were playing dirty without a shred of evidence? You just sound like a washed-up billionaire whining because he lost. This phone is the evidence, but it was untouchable. Damien held it over Lucas's head, maybe just to twist the knife. My only move was to trigger their endgame, to let them believe they had already won. The bankruptcy, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. A controlled demolition. He nodded. I knew the indictment was coming. An investigation was inevitable, so I decided to steer it myself. I filed for Chapter 11, freezing everything and forcing every traitor into the light. I handed over control of Sterling Properties to a trustee, someone with legal powers I'd lost. The authority to issue subpoenas to investigate anyone, not just Damien's hedge fund. I swallowed the public disgrace, the destruction of my name. all to create an arena where the truth had a fighting chance. It's as a Hail Mary, a total gamble. I just looked at him, caught between admiration and terror. He had torched his own legacy, his wealth, his entire life, for one final play. And that insane press conference last week? Pure theatrics, just like you guessed, he confessed with a weary grin. It had to be done. I had to show Damien, and more importantly, show you that I wasn't finished. That the Sterling name still carried weight, even if it was for a ghost project in Dubai. I needed to make Damien doubt himself, to make him nervous. A nervous man gets sloppy. He looked right at me, his gaze softening for a second. I had to remind you who you are. You re not his victim. You're a Sterling. We don't break. The chaos was finally forming a picture, one that was both horrifying and exhilarating. So what now? We take this to the DA. Not yet, my father said, his expression becoming sharp, tactical. The old Robert Sterling, the predator, was back. We have the ledger. They don't know we have it. Right now, Lucas is angry and lost, but he believes he's calling the shots. And Damien is overconfident, convinced he's about to ruin you completely. We have the element of surprise, and we are going to use every bit of it. How? We arrange a meeting, a settlement negotiation for the divorce. I stared at him. What? After everything he's done, you want me to negotiate? I want you to give him a proposal he could never accept while you're wearing a wire, with the Southern District of New York listening to every word. The nerve of the plan stole my breath. You can actually do that? The trustee on the bankruptcy is a retired federal judge, Catherine Reyes. She's famously tough, brilliant, and she hates his guts because of a hostile takeover he botched in the 90s. I've already had a very quiet, unofficial conversation with her. She is extremely interested in any evidence that helps her manage the estate, especially proof of a criminal conspiracy to sabotage it. She knows people in the public corruption unit. They would be captivated by a case about market manipulation and investor fraud, particularly one involving a star hedge fund manager and a real estate empire. It was an insane, high-stakes gambit, using my divorce, my private nightmare, as the bait in a federal sting operation. He'll never meet with me, not after what happened. He'll just send his lawyers. He will meet, my father said, his voice pure steel, because the offer will be to buy his silence, and it's coming from your new attorney. My new attorney? The door to the conference room opened. A woman in her late 50s entered, with a severe black bob, piercing eyes, and an air of total command. She wore an impeccable, custom-made ivory pantsuit. I knew her face instantly from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Eleanor Vance is the shark, the most feared divorce lawyer in all of New York. A legal assassin for the ultra-wealthy who fought wars where fortunes and reputations were on the line. She was notoriously picky, cost a fortune, and had a perfect record. "Chloe," she said. Her voice was calm and deliberate. "It's a pleasure, considering. I'm Eleanor Vance. I'll be representing you." I couldn't speak. How? "I owe your father," she said plainly, placing a black leather briefcase on the table. "A substantial debt. And to be honest, I despise Damien Thorne. He's an entitled, misogynistic pig who thinks his billions make him untouchable. I've wanted an opportunity to humble him for years. This will be enjoyable." She opened the case and took out one piece of paper. "Here is the proposed settlement. The terms are basic. You consent to a swift, no-fault divorce. In exchange, Mr. Thorne will immediately sign over the deed to the triplex on Central Park West, free and clear. He will also transfer $50 million from his personal account to yours in a single payment. In return, you will sign a bulletproof non-disclosure agreement, forfeiting all rights to ever speak about your marriage, your family's business, or any of Mr. Thorne's professional affairs." I almost choked. The offer was so absurd, so arrogant, it was offensive. He will never in a million years agree to this. It's a joke. Of course it is, Eleanor said, a sharp, thin smile appearing. That is precisely the point. It's a first offer so insulting it will guarantee his rage. He'll insist on a meeting just to humiliate you, to remind you who's in charge, to prove he still owns you. He'll want to see you crawl. He'll want to enjoy his final triumph. And that is when the cage door slams shut. The wire, I breathed. Exactly. We hold the meeting right here, in this clean room. The DA's office will be listening in from a van down the street. You will have a recorder on you. You will push his buttons. You'll bring up the ledger, the sabotage, Lucas. You will show him a printout of the most damning text exchange from the phone. You'll accuse him of masterminding my father's ruin. You give him every opportunity to confess. With Damien's ego, he won't be able to resist. And if he doesn't bite, if he's careful, Eleanor's smile never faltered. Then we move to Plan B. We leak the entire ledger to the New York Times. We file a $100 million civil suit against Thorne and Lucas, with the ledger as Exhibit A. We start a media circus that will absolutely destroy his reputation and sink his fund. The criminal indictment will follow. He's finished either way. This meeting is just the faster, more intimate way to burn him to the ground. I looked over at my father. He gave me a slight nod. It's your decision. This was the turning point. I could take the untraceable crypto and the fake passport and just disappear forever. Or I could walk into that room, wired for sound, and ruin the man who shattered my world. It wasn't even a choice. When? I asked, my voice solid as rock. Eleanor checked her watch. My office is reaching out to his attorneys as we speak. The offer is already in his inbox. Knowing Damien's pride, he'll demand to see you in person by tomorrow, at the latest. We need to prepare you. We have to script every line, rehearse every look. We have to make you a flawless instrument of his destruction. She's glanced at my plain dress, my exhausted face, the fading mark on my arm. First, we need to get you dressed like a heartbroken daughter, not a trophy wife after a payday. David, the apartment is secure, my father said. I already had some things sent there. I got to my feet. The pressure of the plan, the child inside me, the treachery. It was a turning point. For the first time since my brother was betrayed and forced out, I wasn't just getting by. I finally had a real weapon in my hands, and it was aimed directly at the man who destroyed him. Daniel sat up, coming over and placing his hands on my shoulders, though his were still trembling. You don't have to do this, Chloe. We could just disappear. Drive up to Oregon. Live a quiet life, a safe one. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a genius who had been completely broken. You didn't teach me to play it safe, Daniel. You taught me how to change the world. A tired, proud smile crossed his lips as he pulled me into a tight, fierce hug. Then go and burn his entire empire to the ground. I followed Simone and my father out of the apartment, leaving the encrypted hard drive and server passwords on the desk for the district attorney's team. I finally grasped what Daniel had been trying to tell me for years. The patents weren't the real prize. The venture capital wasn't the real power. The power was having the guts to expose a devastating lie. It was holding the absolute truth in your hands. The power was turning your deepest wound into a perfectly laid trap. The past week was just the warm-up. The real show was just beginning. The safe house was a modern condo with a view of the San Francisco Bay. The clothes they picked felt like a new uniform, a simple, elegant navy dress, a cashmere wrap, and plain black pumps. No jewelry, not even the engagement ring he'd given me. The entire look was calm, deliberate, and utterly unreadable. It was the uniform of a woman who was finished with mourning and was now in the cold, meticulous business of justice. Simone prepped me for 3 solid hours. We sat at a steel table, the drive and her notes laid out between us like a battle plan. Forget how you feel, she said, her voice sharp as glass. The rage, the betrayal, all of it, that's just ammunition for him. He will use it against you. He will call you as unstable, he'll twist your words, he'll use every insecurity you've ever had against you. Your only emotions are cold disappointment and total certainty. You are not there to ask for anything. You are there to inform him of his options. She made me learn the entire script by heart. I had to be calm, direct, and completely unbreakable. The setting is the hotel conference room. You are already seated at the head of the table. He'll walk in expecting to find you crying. You do not stand. Your first words are, "Nathan, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Then you say, "I've reviewed the divorce settlement. It's unacceptable. So I have drafted a more appropriate one." You slide the new terms across the table to him. When he gets angry, you say, "This is not a negotiation. It is a choice. You can sign, and your theft of my family's research can remain a private family matter. Or you can refuse, and I will file this." You place the evidence summary beside his offer. With the SEC, the U.S. Patent Office, and the Wall Street Journal by 9 a.m. The full data trail proving the fraud goes public right after. Your key phrases are intellectual property theft, securities fraud, and wire fraud. You don't say you ruined my brother. You say you committed fraud to steal proprietary biotech research. This is about his crimes, not your feelings. If he threatens you, you say any attempt at intimidation is being documented as witness tampering. For my own protection, this entire meeting is being recorded. That's the kill shot. The bluff about the recording will either shut him down or his own ego will make him confess to everything, right on tape. We drilled it over and over. I practiced the flat, emotionless voice, the slow way I'd place the papers down, how my hands needed to be perfectly calm. Simone was a relentless coach. Less anger. You're delivering bad news to a board member. Better. Don't lean in. You are not asking. You are telling. During one break, my father came in with a small device, a microphone disguised as a simple pearl brooch. He gently pinned it to my dress. "Voice activated," he murmured. "Perfectly clear audio. The DAs and investigators are in the suite next door. They'll hear every single word. A detective is in this room, behind that one-way mirror." He glanced at a large, tinted glass panel I thought was just part of the decor. "For your safety. If he so much as raises his voice, they will be through that door in 2 seconds. "Will he have a weapon?" I asked, his infamous temper flashing in my mind. "He'll be scanned by hotel security in the lobby. It's protocol for this floor. He'll be unarmed." But Chloe, my father, met my gaze. "The most dangerous weapon he has is how well he knows your heart. He will aim for your weakest point. Your only job is to not have one." At 3:15, Simone's burner phone buzzed. She answered, listened for a moment, and said, "Acknowledged," before ending the call. "He's on his way up. Our source just confirmed it. Nathan will be here at 4. He's coming alone. No lawyers." Apparently, he told his assistant he was going to handle his emotional pregnant wife himself. A tiny dark smile touched her lips. His arrogance. It is always their greatest weakness. The last few minutes felt like a dream. I was dressed in my battle armor. I was wired for sound, and I knew my script cold. I sat by myself in that cold conference room, seeing for my reflection in the dark mirror. I hardly recognized the woman who was staring back at me. She was calm, cold, and ready. The ghost of the wife who broke down in her brother's lab was gone. At 3:58, the door opened. Nathan walked in. He looked, as he always did, like a king of Silicon Valley. An obscenely expensive cashmere sweater, perfect jeans, a casual confidence that said he owned the world. He scanned the room with a sneer, as if its blandness was a personal insult. His eyes finally landed on me. He was expecting, I know, to see me shattered. Someone broken by the last few weeks, exhausted from grief, with pleading eyes. He did not find her. His smirk vanished for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of confusion he quickly hid under his usual arrogance. "Chloe," he said, pausing by the door. You look composed. I'm impressed. I figured you'd be on a wellness retreat by now, trying to meditate away your family's sad little failures. Cold disappointment. I gestured to the chair opposite me. Nathan, thanks for coming. Please, have a seat. He stopped, thrown by the calm, by the authority in my voice. He closed the door and sat down, leaning back with his arms crossed. A perfect pose of dismissive control. So, Simone Voss. That's a bold move. She must be costing you a fortune. I hope your brother's last few dollars are covering her bill. Then again, I hear she has some very flexible payment options. I wonder what you had to offer her. I let the insult just hang in the quiet room. I placed my hands flat on the cool metal of the table. I've reviewed your settlement offer. It's insulting. He actually let out a short laugh. Insulting? Darling, it's a fortune. $10 million to walk away from a marriage that was, let's face it, a business deal. One that is no longer profitable. You should be thanking me. I am here to offer you a counterproposal, I said, my voice completely steady. I slid Simone's one-page term sheet across the table. He grabbed it, his eyes scanning the page, the smug look on his face melting, then twisting into pure, unbelieving rage. He read it a second time, his knuckles going white as he crushed the paper in his fist. He glared at me, his face a mask of cold fury. Are you out of your mind? Is this some kind of sick joke? 51% of the company? All intellectual property reverts to Daniel's name. Has the stress of all this finally made you go completely insane? This isn't a negotiation, I said, my voice like steel, feeling the strength of the lines I'd rehearsed. It's a choice. You can sign and our divorce, along with your corporate espionage, can be settled quietly. Or you can refuse, and I will file this. I slid the printouts of my brother's original data logs to sit next to the term sheet. With the SEC and the tech media, before the market opens tomorrow. And here are the offshore wire transfers proving your theft. The blood drained from Leo's face. He stared at the printout, at the encrypted routing numbers, the damning transfer codes. His smug confidence evaporated, leaving only a pale, stunned silence. What is this? How did you get this? I just smiled. How I got it doesn't matter, Leo. What matters is that it's all here. A perfect 2-year record of your scheme with Chloe to steal Alex's algorithm. Market manipulation to launch your precious new fund. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Or your brother's incompetence, he sneered, unable to see the gold he was sitting on. I didn't even flinch. I just met his gaze, calm and steady. So, is that what Azure Crest Ventures is for, Leo? Is that the shell company for Chloe's generous consulting fees? My question hit him like a physical blow. He actually stumbled backward. That one name, that single detail, was enough to destroy his composure. He was expecting a sobbing wife making empty threats. He never expected to face the woman holding the proof of his entire betrayal. His shock curdled into pure rage. He slammed both fists on the desk, his face just inches from mine. All I could see was the glint of the watch I bought him for our anniversary. It smelled like pure greed. You foolish, he snapped, his charming tech founder mask slipping away to show the monster beneath it. You really think you can blackmail me? You have nothing. Those files, if they even exist, are buried so deep you'll never touch them. And this he grabbed the settlement offer, ripped it to pieces, and let them flutter to the floor is worthless. My lawyers will paint you as an unstable hysteric. I will get full custody of the baby. I'll drown your father's publishing house in litigation until he curses the day he was born. This was it. Any attempt to threaten me or use my pregnancy for leverage will be seen as witness intimidation and obstructing justice, I said, my voice steady, while my heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at a model of his new Boston campus on the shelf, then back to him. Just so you understand, this entire conversation is being recorded. His gaze followed mine. First came understanding, then a flash of raw, primitive fury. He let out a sharp, ugly laugh. Recorded? Are you insane? That's completely illegal, you idiot. My legal team will have that thrown out so fast. It's inadmissible. You just committed a felony. I'm not the one facing an SEC investigation, Marcus, I said, my voice turning to ice. The recording is for my own safety. The real proof is in the encrypted data. And with that city councilman you and Richard bribed. What was his name again? Oh, right. Mr. Alvarez. His entire tough guy act simply dissolved. Alvarez, I had a name from his hidden accounts, proof that I knew it all. You're bluffing, he snarled, but the words had no bite. It sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Am I? I reached into the portfolio on the table, just a single piece of paper. I pulled out a color printout of a blockchain transaction. It showed the untraceable payment to Alvarez, with Marcus's own digital key authorizing it. I slid it across the desk. He stared at it. The blood drained from his face. He saw his own authorization code. His hands started shaking. He was a man watching his empire turn to ash. Where? He whispered. How did you get this? Your partner really needs to learn about secure cloud storage, I said. And you have a pathetic obsession with your own genius. March 12th? Seriously, Marcus? The launch day of your first big product? You use that date as the password for everything. It's just sad. The final blow. His own monumental ego, the date of his greatest success, was the key to his complete and utter ruin that shattered him. The anger surged back, but now it was the rage of a cornered animal. He lunged across the desk, not at me, but for the printout, trying to snatch it away. It's fake, he yelled. It's nothing. It's the ramblings of a failed old man and his crazy pregnant daughter. No one will believe you. I am Marcus Thorne. I built this city's future. You are nobody. He was screaming, face flushed, his $1,000 custom suit suddenly looking cheap and desperate. This was the real Marcus, the viper I'd been sharing a home with. Your power is an illusion, I told him, my voice dangerously calm as I stood up to him. You built it on stolen code and the ruins of my family's legacy, and all of that ends now. You have one option. You sign over my family's publishing house, give back what you took, and I let you disappear. Or you can try to fight me, and I will use every byte of data in these files to make sure you spend the next 10 years in a federal prison. Your powerful friends on the board won't be taking your calls from there. He just stood there, breathing hard, his eyes wide, a predator caught in a trap with no way out. The reality of his situation was finally hitting him. The hidden microphone, the evidence, the prepared confession. And then, something in his expression changed. The rage didn't go away, it just hardened, turning into something colder and far more menacing. A cruel, calculating look I had never seen before settled on his face. He slowly, carefully straightened his designer tie, a pathetic attempt to grab back his lost control. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a low, poisonous whisper, there's always a third option. I just held my ground, watching him, silent. We could make this all just go away. He took a single step closer to me. I didn't flinch. You drop this whole crusade. You sign the divorce agreement I had drawn up. You take the settlement. You move to London. And I make sure your Family S company doesn't get ripped apart by its creditors. I have investors who owe me. I make one call, they get an infusion of cash, a friendly buyout. They'd be back in business before your baby is even born. You could be the one who saves their legacy. The only thing it will cost you is your pride. And this, he gestured around the office, dismissing my entire fight. This sad little quest for revenge. He was offering me a deal, my family's salvation for my silence. It was a brilliant, cruel tactic. It aimed for the one weak spot he knew I still had, my love for my family. I felt my lawyer's strict instructions begin to blur in my mind. This wasn't in the script. This was real. My own justice, or my family's last chance to rebuild everything they had lost. I looked at this man, this monster who knew every single one of my vulnerabilities, and all I saw was a desperate man making one last, hopeless move. "You don't have that kind of power anymore, Marcus," I said, and the conviction in my voice was absolute. "Because by the time you leave this office, you won't have a company to leverage. But the Wall Street Journal will have a story. The SEC will. Your friends on the city council will be so busy deleting emails, they won't even pick up your calls. You have nothing left to bargain with. You're out of cash, out of allies, and out of time." The cruel smirk on his face faltered and died, replaced by a deep, hollow fear. He knew it was true. He had nothing left to play. The private elevator to his penthouse office chimed softly. The doors slid open. A woman stepped out. She was in her late 40s, sharply dressed, her hair pulled back neatly. She wore a dark pantsuit with an SEC badge clipped to her jacket. Two serious-looking men in plain suits stood behind her. "Marcus Thorne," the woman said, her voice professional and calm. Marcus whipped around. "Who in the hell are you?" "Special Agent Miller, SEC Enforcement Division." She held up her credentials for him to inspect. "We've been monitoring your conversation. We have a few questions for you about the Thorne IPO and your partner, Richard Sterling. You're not under arrest. Not at this time. But we will need you to accompany us to our regional office for a formal interview." Marcus just stood there, stunned, his mouth slightly open. He looked from the agent to me, to the damning transaction slip still on his desk. The sight of 3 federal agents in his private sanctuary finally broke him. This is insane. "I want my lawyer," he managed to get out. "Of course," Agent Miller replied, completely unfazed. "You can call him from the car. He can meet us there. Now, if you'll come with us." One of the other agents took a small step forward, a quiet, firm gesture that made it clear this wasn't a request. Marcus Thorne's shoulders slumped. The last of fight went out of him. He moved like a puppet with its strings suddenly cut. He didn't look at me again. He just let the agents lead him out of his own office, a deposed king being escorted from his castle. The elevator doors shut. The silence in the huge office was overwhelming. I slowly sank into one of his ridiculously expensive chairs, my knees finally buckling. The adrenaline that had carried me through the last hour was gone, leaving me exhausted and shaking. The elevator chimed once more. My lawyer, Clara, walked in, right behind my older brother, Leo. His face was tense, but his eyes were blazing with a fierce, triumphant light. "You were unbelievable," Clara said, and I could hear the genuine respect in her voice. "That offer he made about your family's publishing house, that was pure desperation, and you handled it perfectly. You didn't even hesitate. You just dismantled him." "He's not arrested?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. "Not yet," Leo said. He walked over and put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "They'll question him for hours, show him a fraction of the evidence we gave them. Then they'll offer him a deal, testify against Richard Sterling for a lighter sentence. He'll cave. Men like Marcus always protect themselves." The goal wasn't just to stop him. It was to use him to take the entire corrupt enterprise down. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is already prepared to review your family's bankruptcy case," Clara added. "This new information changes the entire picture. It proves they were the targets of deliberate corporate sabotage. It won't erase the damage, but it completely changes the legal narrative. The court's original decision is going to look very, very different now. There's a very good chance we can get the whole thing thrown out. We aren't just trying to survive anymore. We're fighting for justice." Justice. I hadn't let myself even think that word in years. My brother spoke again. "The car is waiting downstairs. We need to leave before the news that Marcus Thorne was just brought in by the SEC. You need to be somewhere safe for a while." I nodded, pulling strength from somewhere deep inside, and got to my feet. I looked around the office, a battlefield of scattered papers, and an overturned chair. It was finally done. The lies, the paranoia, the endless stress of being married to Julian Croft. As I walked out behind them, a new feeling bloomed in my chest, something warmer than revenge. It was peace. Not the peace of giving up, but the peace of a clean win. The peace of seeing that monster for the scared little man he really was. The peace of winning the one war that mattered, the one for my future. The secret ledger was in federal hands now. I watched Julian get into the back of a black government sedan. Suddenly, the divorce seemed like a footnote. The real war was over, and for the first time in years, I was holding all the cards. The next few weeks were a blur of absolute secrecy. I wasn't hiding in some cheap motel. I was moved to a beautiful sun-drenched apartment in a secure Chicago high-rise. Daniel joked that even he couldn't trace the ownership. A gift, he'd said, from some of my father's old contacts. A bonus for a job well done. My new view was Lake Michigan, a huge, clean slate of water and sky that felt like pure freedom after living in Miami's suffocating humidity. I disappeared into the machinery of the justice system. With my lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, I gave a sworn deposition to the assistant U.S. attorney. I handed it all over. The ledger, the thumb drive, the damning photos. I even confirmed the handwriting on certain documents. In all the court filings, I was just Source A, my identity erased from every public record. The case against Julian Croft and Walter Sterling was built quietly, meticulously, and with ruthless speed. Then the story started to break not all at once, but in precise, calculated hits. The Wall Street Journal ran the first piece, citing sources about a cooperating witness in the Sterling case. Julian S.'s handsome face, now looking exhausted and haunted in a grainy courthouse picture, was plastered all over the financial news. His firm, Croft Development, froze all payouts to investors. The sharks could smell blood in the water. Then the New York Times dropped its own bomb, linking billionaire Walter Sterling to the federal investigation. They reported a bankruptcy trustee had found proof of a major stock manipulation plot. Sterling S. lawyers claimed it was all a smear campaign. But they sounded terrified. His company's stock fell 15% before lunch. And just like that, I vanished. The reporters camped outside my old home were gone. The story had a new bad guy. I was no longer the tragic, betrayed wife. I was a protected witness, shielded by the media's unwritten rules. About a month after that scene in the office, a courier brought me a thick, cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of heavy stock paper. All it said was, "S.J., he broke." Gave a full confession, all of it on the record. He's giving them the entire operation Sterling, the offshore accounts, the kickbacks. He's looking at 18 to 24 months in a minimum security prison. His testimony will bury them. Sterling will fight it, but it's done. The old man is finally going down. Another note for you. The deed to the penthouse is being transferred to an LLC in your name. The title is clean. It's yours now. Do what you will with it. V.S. I stared at the message, at Victoria Sterling's perfect initials. So, Julian finally caved. He saved himself instead of his wife, just like we knew he would. That entire divorce settlement was now a stack of evidence. And the penthouse, the place of my deepest humiliation, was somehow mine. The irony was almost too much to bear. I didn't feel like a victor, just a quiet, empty sense of justice, as if the universe had finally balanced its books. Then my intercom buzzed. "Miss Smith? Sophia Reed is here for you." My doorman used the fake name I'd given him for security. My heart, which I thought had turned to ice when it came to her, gave a painful thud. I told him to send her up. I braced myself for anything: yelling, tears, more deception. But the Sophia who got off the elevator looked like a wraith. Her usual confidence was gone. She was in jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked less like a rival and more like a lost girl. She just stood in my doorway, her eyes scanning my new apartment, the river view, all the proof that I had moved on without her. "Can I come in?" Her voice was a whisper. I just nodded and stepped aside. I didn't offer her water. I just stood there waiting. She walked over to the window. "It's a beautiful view. Different." "It's real," I said. She actually flinched at that. After a long pause, she turned around. "I came here. I don't really know why. I just felt like I had to see you. See if you were okay." "I'm fine, Sophia. I know. I saw the news." She hugged herself tightly. "Julian is a monster. I see it now. Maybe I always knew, but I wanted what he had, what you two had. The power. The stability. You wanted the prize," I corrected her, my voice like ice. "You never wanted to earn it. You just wanted to take it." She didn't argue. She just nodded, a single tear cutting through her makeup. "Yes, I did, and I was a total fool. He used me. The same way he used you. He used me as a weapon to get to you. I was just the newest trophy. And now that he's cornered, he's thrown me away. The FBI has already questioned me, asking about the Bahamas, about things he told me in private. I don't think I'm in any real trouble, but my name is on some government watch list. It's finished. The entire life I was trying to build is gone, and it's all my own fault. I just watched her crumble. This woman used to be my sister. Now she was just a stranger falling apart in my home. The rage I'd been holding on to was just gone, burned away. All that was left was a tired kind of pity. "What do you want, Sophia? Forgiveness?" "No," she said, shaking her head quickly, her hair whipping around. "I could never ask for that. I had to tell you I'm sorry. Not because I got found out, but I am so sorry for what I did. For the betrayal. For being so awful to you. The things I said in that garage were pure evil. I was so sick with jealousy I wasn't thinking. You were my best friend, and I destroyed our friendship for a man who saw us both as completely disposable." She finally looked me in the eye, and her own were filled with pain. "I'm leaving New York. I'm going back to Rhode Island. My mom is sick, so I'm going to take care of her. It's a good reason to just disappear." I didn't say anything. The silence was heavy with the ghosts of 1,000 happy memories, of a friendship that was now nothing but ash. "I hope you find peace, Sophia," I finally said. It was the only thing I could give her. Not forgiveness, just an end to the fight. She nodded, and fresh tears started to fall. "Thank you." As she left, she paused in the doorway. "For what it's worth, you were always the stronger one. I think that's why I hated you so much." And with that, she was gone. I went back to the window and watched the river flow out to the sea. The last tie to my old life was finally cut. My final meeting with my father took place in his suite at the Lel Hotel. His case was also moving along. His decision to cooperate with the authorities had changed everything. His own charges were being drastically reduced. He was pleading guilty to 1 count of securities fraud. He was now looking at 12 to 18 months, probably at a low-security facility. He would also pay massive fines from his Swiss accounts, which were being seized. He was losing it all, his fortune, his name, his freedom, but he was going to keep his life and a chance at some kind of new beginning. We sat on a balcony overlooking the city. He looked tired but calm. "That penthouse is yours," he said to me. "You should sell it. The money from a sale like that would be enough to start over. Completely clean." "I'm not selling it," I said. He looked completely shocked. "Why in the world not? That place is haunted by bad memories." "Exactly," I answered. "It's my trophy, and I am going to sell it, but not on the open market. I'm going to auction it off, and every single dollar will go to a new foundation, the Ashcraft Financial Justice Initiative. It will provide legal help to people swindled by men like Julian. It will protect other whistleblowers, and it's going to teach financial literacy to people who need it most." My father just stared at me, his eyes wide in disbelief. Then a slow, proud smile spread across his face. "You're turning poison into medicine." I'm turning a liability into an asset. I smiled back. You taught me that. He reached out and took my hand. I taught you about money. You, my girl, you learned about the heart. I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. After all this nightmare, you didn't just survive it, you thrived. I had a good teacher, I whispered, squeezing his hand, even when he was teaching me the kind of person I never wanted to be. The morning of my father's hearing was cool and bright. He wore a simple dark suit and stood straight, his voice firm as he pleaded guilty. The courtroom was nearly empty. It was really just a formality, but I made sure I was there. My mother, Victoria Sterling, sat in the front row. In the back, the bankruptcy trustee, Eleanor Vance, watched with an unreadable expression. The judge, a woman known for being tough but fair, accepted his plea and scheduled his sentencing for 3 months later. She detailed his crimes, one by one, and all the lives he'd shattered. He just stood there, head down, taking it all in. Afterwards, we walked out of the courthouse. A few cameras flashed, but the media mob was gone. It felt almost quiet. The world was already over it. He was old news. A simple black town car was waiting, not one of his limousines. My ex-father-in-law paused before getting inside. I have to go meet my parole officer, he said, and then I just wait. I'll be there, I promised him, every visiting day. He hugged me, a tight, desperate embrace. I know, now go on. Live your life. Make something real. I just stood on the pavement, watching the car disappear into traffic. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, but no tears came. This wasn't the end, just a new chapter starting. A year later, I was at the Women in Finance Annual Summit. I was nominated for my work on the Phoenix Project. In 12 short months, we had already backed over 20 lawsuits against predatory lenders, helped hundreds of duped investors, and rolled out a financial literacy program in high schools across 3 states. We had clawed back millions for the victims. The Sterling name wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a symbol of justice, a real chance at fighting back. I wore a simple blue dress with my mother's pearl earrings. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing a part. I was finally just me. I auctioned off the Beacon Hill townhouse for $32 million, setting a new record for the neighborhood. Every last cent went to my urban redevelopment fund. I lived on a simple director's salary and some very dull, safe investments I'd made with my emergency savings. My new home was a bright 1-bedroom apartment in the Seaport District. It was all mine. My name was on the deed, nobody else's. I'd filed for divorce, citing fraud and desertion. With Marcus now testifying against his own father, the old man was fighting the charges from his mega yacht in Monaco. He was losing, badly. Our divorce was just a formality, finalized 2 months ago. I was Amelia Hayes again, standing at that podium, looking out at a room full of Boston's most influential women CEOs, politicians, artists. I felt none of my old anxiety. No need to be perfect. A year ago I started, my voice steady and clear. I learned the world I lived in was a complete lie, built on backroom deals and the pride of men who thought money made them kings. I was brought up to believe my only value was my appearance. I was told I was a problem, a delicate thing that had to be managed. I saw women in the crowd nodding, recognizing that feeling. They all knew what it meant to be underestimated. I was given a set of keys. They were meant to lock me in a gilded cage, to live a pretty, quiet, and shameful life. Instead, I used those keys to unlock new doors, to build something where the truth actually had value. I learned the best investments aren't in property or the stock market. They're in people, and in the guts to do the right thing. I talked about the fund, about turning a symbol of my own private humiliation into an engine for rebuilding neighborhoods. I talked about second chances. I never mentioned Marcus or his father. They were just footnotes in my story now, not the main characters. I was. When I finished, the applause was a physical force, a wave of warmth and respect. As I stepped down, women came to shake my hand, press their cards into my palm, and whisper words of support. Then the crowd drifted towards the bar, and that's when I saw him. He was near a marble pillar at the back, half swallowed by the shadows. My heart did a complete flip. Ethan Cole. We knew each other at Boston University years ago, in what felt like another lifetime. He was a scholarship kid from Southeast Sharp, ambitious, and with a sense of right and wrong that was almost terrifying. We had a thing. Not really dating, but much more than just friends. Intense arguments in the library, coffee that bled into dawn. There was one perfect kiss after we broke a story for the campus paper. It felt like the beginning of everything. But then Marcus's father made some cruel remark about him, and I, trying to keep everyone happy, trying so hard to belong, I let us drift apart. Ethan knew why. He never confronted me. He just gave me this one, long look with those dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and then he was just gone. I'd heard he became a Pulitzer-nominated investigative reporter for the Sentinel, exposing financial fraud, a real modern-day knight. He looked older now. The fire I remembered in his eyes had settled into a solid, quiet confidence. He wore a dark suit that was clearly custom-made, and he was looking right at me. A small, unreadable smile touched his lips. I started weaving my way through the clusters of people, my pulse doing a frantic tap dance. He pushed himself off the pillar as I approached. "Amelia Hayes," he said. His voice was deeper, but that same Boston accent was still there. A solid, real sound. That was one hell of a speech. "Ethan Cole," I replied, stopping a few feet from him. "I didn't know you covered the black tie charity circuit. I'm a fan of happy endings and new beginnings." His eyes, still the color of strong coffee, studied my face. "You look different. In a very good way. You look like you." "It's the flattering lighting," I joked, fighting a sudden wave of nerves. "It's not the lighting." He finally smiled, a genuine one that lit up his features and chased away the shadows. "I've been following the Phoenix Project. What you're building is impressive. Fearless. Thank you. I hear you're the top reporter at the Sentinel. Taking down the corporate villains." "Something like that. Actually, my team and I sent an anonymous tip to your project a few months back. That data leak about the corrupt property developer? That was from us." I just stared at him. I remembered seeing the note about a confidential source in our legal filings, but I never imagined it was him. "You didn't say anything. I wanted to see what you'd build with it. All on your own." He took a small step closer, and the chatter of the gala seemed to fade into the background. "I have to admit, when I saw the news last year, the bankruptcy, the whole public scandal, I was worried about you. I thought the princess in the penthouse might not survive the fall. Turns out the penthouse was a prison," I said softly. "Falling was the only way to get free." He held my gaze, and for a moment I saw the ghost of that college newsroom, the story we never got to write, and the life I threw away. "I'm glad you got free, Amelia." "Me too." A heavy silence settled between us, full of a decade of things left unsaid. "Listen." He started, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "This is probably awful timing, and the worst possible venue for this, but I'm in town for a few weeks wrapping up that developer story. I was just wondering if you might want to grab a coffee or a drink to compare notes on fixing this city, or whatever, really." It wasn't some grand romantic line. It was just a simple, quiet question, a hand reaching out across the ruins of my past mistakes. I looked at him, at this man who was a living link to a different road, a more honest version of me, a girl I had almost erased. And I knew the woman I was now wasn't the socialite, or the cheated-on wife, or the woman who got her revenge. She was someone who fought for others and won. She was someone who could finally choose for herself, without fear. I smiled. A real smile, one that came from somewhere deep. "Comparing notes sounds suspiciously like work, Ethan. How about we just have dinner? The look of surprise, followed by a slow dawning of hope in his eyes, felt better than any award. Dinner? He repeated, his own smile growing wider. Tomorrow, I asked. He just nodded. It was a promise. He lightly touched my elbow. Just a brief, warm contact, and then he was gone, absorbed back into the crowd. He left me standing there, the silk of my dress suddenly feeling cool against my skin. The sense of possibility was so strong I could almost taste it. I looked beyond the sparkling room, out at the Boston skyline, lit up against the night. That part of my life was over. The accounts were settled. My former father-in-law was about to get a lesson in true justice, and I, Amelia Hayes, was free. Not just free from a toxic marriage or a disgraced family name. I was free to choose, free to create, free to just exist. The start of my new life wasn't a lightning strike. It was a quiet decision made in a very loud room. It was a second chance, both offered and accepted. It was the simple realization that the most precious thing I ever recovered was myself. And this story, my real story, was only just beginning.